My name is Ron Carrico with the San Diego Air and Space Museum. Today is March the 30th, 2018, and I'm with William Buck Rogers, retired Navy pilot and flew. So here we are, we're in Coronado, California, and let's start off easy questions. Where were you born?
Born in Chatham, Massachusetts,
And,
March 5th, 1924.
and what did your parents do?
My parents were, my father had, my father was a automobile salesman, and my mother had been a teacher.
World War II started for us in December 1941. Where were you?
High school,
What year?
1941.
Uh,
I
what-
graduated in 1942.
So you were
June of 1942.
then. Did you attend? Did you go into the Navy right away?
Yes, I did. I heard about the Naval Aviation Cadet Program because of my interest in aviation, and I wanted to be a pilot, and the Navy was my choice, so everything fell together beautifully. So I went to Fargo, Boston, in the Fargo building, which is where the Navy was conducting tests. And I remember distinctly going through and taking the tests. And in those days, the fast communications were by telegram. And before I got home that night, or 2 days later, whenever it was, I sent a telegram to my mother saying it passed with flying colors. I don't think she was very happy, but anyway, I was sworn in eventually on August 6th, 1942.
And so when you went through primary,
Yes, I had to wait a while to be called up because there was a backlog of pilots. So I was called on active duty on August 12th of 1942, and I went to Rensselaer Polytech for 3 months for what they call CPT, Civilian Pilot Training. And I completed what you would call about a semester of college, and during the time I learned to fly the Luscombe A-Day aircraft, which had, incidentally, it was winter in Troy, New York, and I made my first solo in an aircraft with skis.
oh wow! And what was the kind of airplane again?
That was the Luscombe, Luscombe 8A, which was an all-metal aircraft. The skis were hung outside of the wheels, so you had no brakes, so you had to navigate around the ground using your rudder and any wind you had.
How'd you stop it?
You had to gauge your stopping. It was interesting. And if you stayed too long in one place, you'd freeze there.
Oh wow!
And so you had to kind of, if you got stuck, well, you'd have to blast the prop quite a bit to get it. It was a comfortable airplane for me. And I remember 7 hours and 20 minutes later, I got my first solo flights.
It is funny. It's always about 8 hours when you're solo. It seems like no
Yeah,
matter what
the magic number is 8 hours.
it's always that, you know. So then you went on to where?
Then I went to pre-flight school at Athens, Georgia.
And what did you fly there?
No flying. It was all just learning to be a Navy man. That was our Naval Academy, which took about 3 months.
And then where did you actually end up going to flight training then?
Then I started Memphis, Tennessee, flying the Stearman and the N2S. The Stearman was built by Stearman Company, but the aircraft company, but the N2S was built by the Navy.
Now, Stearman has a big old radial in it. Well, how much horsepower do they have? Do you remember?
Beg your pardon?
How much horsepower does the Stearman have?
About 180.
Okay. And then from there you go on to the SN. Well, you went to the.
Then I went to Corpus Christi, Texas for my basic training instrument training, and final training.
And flying
All
the,
in flying the SNV, they called it Victor, made the consolidated Vultee. We called it the Vultee Vibrator.
and the reason they call it the vibrator is because?
Because the wings flapped like a gull.
Really?
There was a vibration in that aircraft, but of course this is Navy time. I don't think it would have lasted this day's technology. But that was just basic training. We didn't do any acrobatics. Then I went from there to Beeville, one of the outlying fields from Corpus, and got checked out on instruments in the SNJ, and I started flying the SNJ then, but back seat, and the instructor was up front, and then which is opposite from today, but then
well, for instrument training it makes sense.
I went for instrument training.
Yeah, okay.
And then I moved to Kingsville, Texas for fighter pilot training. That's right, flying the SNJ for Rio.
Okay, now so for fighter pilot training, what did you do differently than, what kind of things did you practice?
We did, before we're just learning to fly straight and level without losing altitude or things of that sort. Just very basic stuff. Every single flight that I was on goes back in my memory to the one that I got when I was flying the Luscombe. Always have a place to land in mind. So we were doing basics, how to land, how to take off, how to navigate, how to use your instruments. Now in fighter pilot training we would learn how to fly formation, how to shoot guns, and how to also maneuver in air combat maneuvering.
Did the SNJ have guns?
Yes.
Oh, it did. Oh.
And it had a pod they would hang on there.
Ah, okay. Now when you talked about aircraft maneuvering,
we called it aerobatics. We just learned how to use the aircraft upside down and other maneuvers like the Immelman turn, the barrel roll, the slow roll,
split S.
snap roll.
But did you actually engage other aircraft?
Yeah, and I get into a little dogfight, and we were trained in dogfighting late in our training. This is like January, but no, I graduated in January, but it was sometime in December in Corpus Christi, Texas. And my dogfight instructor, I beat his butt in the air, and he was a little bit miffed with me.
Well, let me ask you this. Okay, so this is 1943. So the first line fighter for the Navy at that time was still the Wildcat.
Yeah, we were when I was going back a little bit, when I was in primary training, I saw my first F8F. So a guy came through and he had a gun on his hip, and he was transferring the aircraft from the East Coast to the West Coast.
Now the F8F is a Hellcat.
That was the Hellcat. Now they were brand new then. So when I graduated in January of 1944, December 1943, the Hellcat was just coming online.
In 1943 would have included the thatch weave. Would that be correct?
It was based on what we learned from the F8F and air combating that occurred in the Pacific at that time, and how to fight the Zero.
So what was the?
Well, we had to keep in mind that the Zero had a better climb rate than we had. It was much lighter and much easier to. So we were taught things like the thatch weave.
Right.
And I don't know if I need to describe that to you, but it was a.
Go ahead and describe it with your
Okay.
hands. Use your hands for that.
Okay, a thatch weave was invented by a guy, one of our aviators who became a vice admiral, Jimmy Thatch, T-H-A-T-H, I think. But he invented the idea that because the Zero was so maneuverable, we had to keep an eye on what was going on. And because the fighters were going to be used to cover for the slower moving TBMs or SBDs, we would have to fly cover over them. So it was a way in which we would keep a weave moving based upon a basic concept of 4 aircraft, 1 division. The skipper or the flight leader would be in one with a wingman, and the number 2 man, the section leader, would take the other guy. So there'd be 2 on a wing, and they'd cross paths like this, continuously moving. What this does is it keeps eyeballs at all 360 degrees of the compass at all times, and keeps everybody cleared of anything that's approaching from out of the sun or from somewhere else. It was a beautiful maneuver, and you maintained that integrity until you got into a dogfight, and then it turned into every man for himself. But you maintained that integrity best you could the entire flight until it came time to go in on the target.
How many hours could you fly in a Hellcat?
4 hours is basic.
Really? Wow.
You could carry an external fuel tank, one I emphasize, only one, a drop tank.
Now, Thatch was your neighbor around here, wasn't he?
Well, that came later.
Well, I mean, recently, last 20 years or so, right?
He lived in this neighborhood.
Yeah.
I didn't get to know him at all, but he was always acclaimed as one of the best. That was one of the best maneuvers ever developed to combat the Zero. Now, World War I was much different. The things they learned then were useful when we got into the hassle part of it.
Specifically, can you remember one thing you learned about when you get into the actual one-on-one dogfight?
Yeah, the integrity broke up. You started losing. If you were a wingman, which I was, of course I was down the end of the line. I was a junior ensign, and that's the way we trained. If you're on somebody's wing, the first thing that happens, you separate from your leader, and you wind up doing. You shouldn't. You're trained to keep with him, but I defy anybody to be able to do it under combat conditions.
Boy, that really said it all right there. That really is the case, isn't it?
Yeah, it was an unwritten rule, I guess you'd say, that when all hell broke loose, every man for himself, and Katie barred the door. And some things that you were trained on to keep your airspeed up had to be countermanded with some other thought about getting on this guy's tail, which means you're going to have to do some maneuvering, lose some airspeed. I'm getting a little bit complicated, but basically it becomes part of the instinct. And going back to the original question, they were training me in Kingsville to do just that. In other words, when learn to think for yourself.
Well, you said you defeated your instructor in a one-on-one.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
At least I did. He says, you almost spun in. I knew I had. He says, you don't want to do that. And and I kept that in mind, actually. It meant a lot to me. And I felt a little bad because he was kind of angry. Nobody knows that he did what he did. And it was...
What did he do?
He was maintaining his airspeed the way you should to keep the airplane going and keep in accelerated flight as best he could. And he was losing speed, and he was in a position, I know that if I pulled a G or two more, I'd be spinning myself. So I'd have to keep it right on the edge in order to stay with him. Because he was good. I never got into that kind of a dogfight in real combat ever, but it was good training.
So you were right on the edge of losing control, and then.
Yeah, I was and he was. And he didn't want me to spin in. I know he was his instructor. Wouldn't that be great? He came home and I didn't.
So what did he do? Call it off all of a sudden?
Yeah, he says that's enough. But in those days you didn't have the mic in the up against your face. You had to reach down and grab the mic and put it in your mouth, which was kind of
So let's go ahead. So you go from that. Now you went directly then into the. Well, I guess you did fly the Wildcat.
yeah. And then the next step is I got my wings at Corpus Christi as of January 1st, 1944.
So this took.
But I actually was 21st of January.
Okay, what's the difference? What was the difference between the SNJ and a Wildcat?
About 1,500, about 1,000 horsepower, I would say, is a given. The Wildcat had a 3-bladed prop. The SNJ had a 2-bladed prop. The SNJ was built for 2 people. The Wildcat was built for 1.
Okay, now let's talk about the Wildcat for a second. So you had a throttle, you had a pitch control, I suppose, and mixture, correct?
Yes, you did.
And supercharged or turbocharged?
You had a turbocharger, but it wasn't much use. Let's see, I don't remember the horsepower rating of a Wildcat, but comes back as something like 1,400. It had a pitch that was controlled by a knob. The throttle was controlled by a conventional throttle, and alongside the throttle was the mixture control, which was all manual. You had to kind of monitor it as you went up in altitude to change for the needs of the.
How did you do that? By temperature?
You would watch the temperature and the RPM, and maintain a little less. Actually, there was a position that said normal, and you would usually leave it there. In most of the things that we did at this time.
When you went into combat, what'd you do?
In combat, I think they probably kept it full rich all the time. I never flew the Wildcat in combat, but these airplanes were retreads that had come back. Because now at this time they were a little advanced. The fleet is now receiving the F8F, the Hellcat. So there's nothing but Hellcats out in the Pacific.
So were your first carrier landings in the SNJ?
Yes. It turns out I was scheduled, I finished my operational training at Green Springs, Florida in the F4F. The Wildcat. After that, I was sent to Glenview, Illinois to qualify on the Wolverine or Sable, and the 2 ships were still there. Of course, this is winter. I got there in early April, and I finally made my landings in something like the 21st of April. I don't know exactly what date it was, of 1944.
Okay, so let's back up a second. Okay, so you went to, I think it said Glenview, right?
Glenview, Illinois.
That's near Chicago somewhere?
Yes, it's right north of Chicago. It's now a shopping center.
So the Navy had 2 aircraft carriers.
The Wolverine and Sable.
And they were old?
They were all, according to, there are 2 versions of this that I have a little trouble dealing with. I read a more recent history, and my memory was that they were paddle wheelers. But they're not the kind of paddle wheelers you'd see on the Mississippi with a great big paddle. They were in the side of the ship, both port and starboard, and sort of invisible.
How many landings did you make on these?
8. Had to have 8 full arrested landings in full, 8 takeoffs. They had no island. Well, there was an island off to the side. The stacks were off to the side, and they had 8 wires and a barrier. My recollection, well, I flew this to the Sable. And I finally got to make my landings on the Sable, to make it clear. Now, if you recall, I said that I was flying the SNJ up to December of 1943 before I got my wings.
Right.
So I since then been flying the Wildcat. So I was scheduled to fly the Wildcat on the Sable to make my carrier landings. I had already been trained in carrier qualifications, field carrier landing practices, so I was ready to go with the Wildcat. But the wind wasn't sufficient for me to be able to use it. The Wolverine Sable would only make 20 knots max, and they need a lot more wind over the deck. Like 30 knots is better. And backlog, and left in that one ready room with no chairs and no chalkboards, or nobody in there except one guy with a telephone saying, "It's time for 8 of you to get out there on the line and go ahead and fly."
So you would fly and you would land, and then would you just take off immediately?
Well, and I'd never flown FCOP in the SNJ that I can recall.
What's FCOP?
So, field carrier landing practice, where
Okay.
you practice your carrier landings on the beach, on a regular runway ashore, before you go out to sea.
Right.
And with the landing signal officer and everybody sitting in their proper place. So you'd practice those landings, and when the LSO, the landing signal officer, decided you were ready, he would let you go. So I went out with an SNJ, with about maybe an hour's flight that morning, and FCLP, and then I'm out there for my 8 carrier landings, which I got all in a row, and then I'm done.
So you land, and then
land,
and then you take off in the remaining amount of.
you'd land, and they'd call it pullback. You would raise your hook, and actually the old ones that we had that were patched up, I had an SNJ, and he actually took a cord line and wrapped it around the elbow rest for the throttle arm.
Right.
Of all things, it was that rudimentary. But I pull the hook up, and then the plane handlers on the outside would come aboard and push you back to give you a full deck run for a takeoff.
How long was the deck?
There was no catapult.
How long was the deck?
You just deck run always.
How long was the deck? 600-700 feet, something like that.
It's about 600 feet.
No, that's okay.
It's in there somewhere.
That's fine.
It was plenty long enough for an SNJ, because with the flaps down, you see, you take off the flaps down.
And so then you just did them consecutively, and
Yeah, and you'd go around the circle until you were ready to come in. You had a regular pattern that you flew in, and you peeled off, and it was mostly by sight. Most of the landings were not controlled very much
there was no.
by anybody except the LSO.
Oh, the LSO. Okay.
And we had radio contact, but I don't remember too many signals by radio. Most of it was just a collection.
How did you feel about that? Was it scared to death, or?
I was happy to get out of that ready room that was full of cigarette smoke. It meant at the end of the day I was going to get my orders to get on a train and head for somewhere.
Where'd you go?
I went to Hershey, Pennsylvania.
So is that when you first started flying the F8F then?
And I got to Hershey, Pennsylvania to learn how to be a photo pilot.
A photo pilot? What the heck is that?
So I became a photo pilot in the F8F. But I had never flown the F8F. And the guys at Hershey were kind of a minimum crew. It wasn't a full air station. But they had photographic equipment there, which I learned how to use on the ground training.
Okay, so you go from the Hellcat, or you go from the Wildcat to the Hellcat.
without any training, except when I got there, the whoever was the lieutenant, I think, that was running the facility, gave me the logbook, the handbook rather. It says, read the handbook and let me know when you're ready to start flying.
And?
So that's the way it was.
And so what was the difference between the two?
Not much. It was a much more powerful aircraft and much easier to fly. The Wildcat was tough on the ground. It was much more complicated than the F6F.
Well, you had, I'm thinking the Wildcat, you had to raise the gear by a pump or something like that. Hand pump. And so the Hellcat, now the Hellcat had, I'm sure, way more horsepower.
Yeah, it had about 2,800. It's an R2800.
That's right.
But I can't think of the horsepower. It was around 2,000.
Yeah. So a significant increase.
That's a significant increase. Yeah. It was like 600 more.
Yeah. So the, now, well, I've never heard, okay, photo pilot training. So what were you learning to do after you learned how to use the cameras?
They had, the Navy found a need for photos for bomb damage assessment, which had a bearing on what I was going to be doing when I went into my squadron.
Did you ever do that?
Yes, I did, and I'll explain it to you, if you
okay.
When we get to it.
Okay.
But they trained us in what they called a trimetragon gear.
The what?
It was trimet. It was a cage, nothing more than a section. The hellhole door, which was the door and the bilges on the other side of the Hellcat, were open, or could be reached on any Hellcat. There was a way that there was spring-loading doors that would reach down, and you could put things in there, like bags and extra gear or something if you're going on a trip. Well, in that space, right under the pilot's seat, they put this trimet gear. This trimetragon gear would have focal lengths, varying focal lengths, vertical, vertically aimed, and then 30 degrees aimed at 30 to 45 degrees right and left. That's the trimet. It's 25 or 30, I've forgotten the number, it's 45, we'll say 45 degrees to the right and then to the left, and one underneath. And you can see what I was doing. I was getting a picture of the horizon as I flew along, and I was getting a picture of the ground as I flew over it. And they could put this together in a mosaic and kind of look at the landscape I was going over. The idea was that you don't have to go, only have to go over the target one time and get the pictures you needed.
So I'm looking here. So
they have an intervalometer.
So you would fly over the target that somebody had already hit, and then you take pictures to assess what happened.
Here's the way we used it when I finally got out in the fleet. I was usually assigned to a flight somewhere, usually in the as the last aircraft in the flight, and it was my job when we came to a target to fly over the target before anybody made an attack. And so I would make a straight and level, and it had to be at steady altitude because we didn't have any way of controlling the gyroscope effect that you might have had later in the development of photography. But I'd have to keep straight and level flight so that they could know what flight when the pictures were taken, they'd know where I was. And also have all three cameras on so that they'd take a picture of everything to my right and my left. Then I'd go back to join the group in my proper position in the flight, find my flight leader, get to the position. The section leader had flown with me, so with the two of us to come back together.
So what airspeed and what altitude?
Around, the usual altitude was 10,000 feet.
And airspeed?
It depended on the target, and it depended on the elevation of the target, of course, as you all know. but it's 10,000 feet over the ground is pretty much what we were looking for.
But
And if you knew that, I was trained in Hershey on how to set the focal lengths so that we could get the proper dimension that we needed, and actually the clarity that they needed to evaluate what was there.
well, first of all, you had to check out on the F6F.
Yeah, I
First,
had to do that.
fly.
I had to do that. That was done very quickly, and they had a little syllabus, and I don't remember much about it except I had to learn to fly my way around, get acclimated to the cockpit. And I'm telling you again, it was much easier than the Wildcat. It was easier to fly. It was easier to navigate by. It had a better cockpit, more room, and better equipment, and a little bit more automatic equipment. We actually had an auto gyro in there.
So how many training flights did you have in actually taking pictures?
You'd have to look at my logbook. It must have been like 4 or 5.
So then you come out to North Island Naval Air Station.
Well, then I had several flights after I learned to fly it,
Right.
where I was taking pictures of around Hershey, Pennsylvania, and I don't remember what I took of, but we were designated certain targets and we go there. Then I came to North Island for further assignment, and I was assigned to VF-30, which was at Pasco, Washington, so I went up there. And I was one of 2 photo pilots in the squadron, and this is a rather new activity at that time.
So now I see here you had 430 hours at that time, so you were a pretty accomplished pilot by that time.
By that time I learned how to upside down from right side up.
Yeah, well, I mean, you hear stories about, in the Japanese at that point, they had
Very little
flying time.
It was sort of pathetic in a way. I felt a little sorry for him in a way, if you can feel sorry for him.
So now you stayed up in Washington, and I see you deployed on the Belleau Wood in January '45.
Right.
And so you must have done a lot of training for.
We did air combat maneuvering. A lot of the thatch weave work that I talked about earlier.
Right.
We got acclimated. I was assigned to a flight. The flight leader's name was Al Yasinski, and my section leader was a guy named Bob Burns, and Bob Carey, Charles Carey, was the other wingman. So we were always together in combat. Always is a strong word. Not always. Occasionally get thrown into another.
Okay,
flight.
so it says you reported to Pasco in August, and then you deployed in January, and then the first strike mission was February. It looks like February 16th, 1945.
That was Iwo Jima.
Okay, well, let's back up. I gotta know. I'll say now you leave on an aircraft carrier. How long did it take you to get to the combat zone?
About a month.
What was it like to be on a carrier for a whole month?
Well, we stopped by Honolulu in Hawaii,
Well, that was
and
fun.
we did a lot of training there too en route.
Right.
And we got cleared for some. Apparently, they were thinking about the Iwo Jima and Okinawa campaigns at that time, and they were trying to figure out how to muster how Bull Halsey wanted everybody to get together out there and get this operation moving, because it turned out in the later phases of the war and during Okinawa, there were 5 task elements to his task force, and so and each task element had 4 carriers, 2 battleships, 2 cruisers, 25 destroyers, and there were 5 of them. So count them up; they're pretty big, and a lot of ocean, and a lot of command and control problems. And we were trying to do everything electronically.
So your first combat then was being in combat was the invasion of Iwo Jima.
And it was sad to say I didn't see anything in the air at all, except my own people, and all the things that were happening on the ground we couldn't see much of. But the first mission was really a snooper anti-submarine patrol mission, which is a 300-mile mission where you're looking for submarines. very unusual if you ever saw one, an enemy submarine. It was a kind of a waste of time. I
So
thought,
when you were flying, though, were you carried with a, were you had some way to attack the submarine? Did you have a bomb with you?
no, all we had was our radio. We found one here, and we let them know.
You didn't.
We didn't. We didn't carry any depth charges or anything like that.
So the
We carried 20mm guns, but that wouldn't do much good to a submarine that was submerging.
Yeah.
No, mainly our job was to give early warning to the ships that there were snoopers in the area.
so so actually on the invasion of Iwo Jima, then you didn't actually participate in the attack on the island. Then I mean, you weren't down
No.
there strafing people and all that.
We were called in. Yes, we did. With close air support.
Oh, really?
But that was we did it there in Okinawa. We would report to a station, usually offshore somewhere, and we'd be called in by the controller, and he would give you a target to hit, and with whatever ammunition. First of all, you check in. The division leader would check in at such certain place and tell them that we have 4, and he'd name the type aircraft and what they had load. They had either rockets, bombs, napalm, whatever it was. I need some napalm at such and such. I got some Japanese in a cave here, so if you had the napalm, you were called in and you would follow the orders from the controller, who was on the ground at that time.
So were you involved in any of those TAC flights?
Oh yeah.
What were you carrying?
Usually napalm, and 20mm. We had a lot of that.
Well, so describe what you do in a napalm attack.
You had to. The controller would give you a mark with a very pistol light that would put a smoke bomb very close to the target, and he'd say it's. In those days, in Vietnam they use a different term, but in these days it'd say about 50 feet below, or 100 yards to the right. You'll see a cave there. That's where I want this. And sometimes you could see it, sometimes you wouldn't.
What was the attack speed?
And what you'd do is drop the attack profile would be one of getting a lot of speed, not too much. You didn't need an awful lot. Just fly straight at the target and drop the bomb. It would be a drop tank, belly tank we called it in those days, and it would drop up, sometimes end over end or sideways or whatever. Eventually it would take flight, generally in the direction you're going. Not very good capability of aiming it. It was just where you were flying it. Sometimes you'd hit it, sometimes you wouldn't.
Would you be using your gun at the same time? I mean, when you're coming in, were you?
Oh yeah, when you're in the dive, you would give you the information of the proximity of friendly forces, and whether or not you'd use 20mm or not would depend on the situation. Don't hold your fire. We got friendlies close by, so you'd fly in on this profile to your target, click off your napalm and let it go, and then get the hell out of there. And usually the defenses were kind of meager in both Okinawa and Iwo Jima as far as air is concerned. We ran it. I will explain a little bit. We spent less of our time on that than we did hunting for kamikazes. And the Fast Carrier Task Force was sent up north in the vicinity of Japan, did most of its work there. If you see in my resume, it's my autobiography there, you'll find that I had the first Tokyo raid as one of my first combat missions. Now,
Well, I see you have
different.
here first strike mission is Tokyo.
Yeah, that's it.
So,
Yeah. Okay, we went We had we called it the Tokyo raids. Actually, the aim point was not Tokyo. It was we were at Yokosuka, and we had a target assigned that later became the air station. I mean the naval base that we took over and after the end of World War II. But it was a bunch of rocks and everyone was holed into those rocks, and quite a few Japanese ships in the harbor, small ones. You never saw a big one. They were all at sea, and
So no,
a
okay.
hell of a lot of flak.
So what did you attack with? I mean, how many airplanes?
I don't remember the exact number. It must usually 8 or it could be 12.
But was it
Hellcats.
no SBDs, no torpedo bombers?
They could be, but they were in a. There was more coordinated than that. There might be a position, a time when the whole squadron stuck together. In other words, our whole air group consisted of fighters and torpedo planes.
Right.
We had 15 torpedo planes and 24 fighter planes. The 24 fighters would be probably about 12 of them would be sent on a target. That'd be 3 divisions, and there'd be probably 8 torpedo planes. There were only 15 of them on the ship, and we'd fly cover for them out there. Then once we got there, the torpedoes would go in, we'd protect them, and then we'd bomb and strafe, protecting them primarily, and looking out for wherever the Japanese were going to intercept us.
They didn't have dive bombers. The SBDs weren't involved.
Not in our ship.
Hmm.
Now we had them somewhere in the task force, but we didn't have them on the Belleau Wood.
We
We only had torpedo planes. They were the bombers, and the fighters, and we carried bombs too.
So it just seemed to me that the torpedo planes, it just seemed like a
They were a truck,
horrible airplane, and
slow.
and as soon as you drop the darn torpedo, you're going to end up pretty much flying right over the thing you're shooting at.
They did very seldom carry torpedoes. The only time they loaded up with torpedoes was when the Yamato came down, and I was in on that a little bit.
Oh, you were? Oh, wow.
They were loaded with torpedoes then, but that was a last minute. That was not planned.
Well, what were they using the torpedo planes for? Just as
Torpedo. They put, it's got a bomb bay that could load out a ton of bombs. They had different racks. They had a rack for torpedoes. They had racks. I'm not very familiar with the TBM, but they had doors that opened like an accordion.
So were they trying to, in this attack on Tokyo, were they attacking the
Yeah,
base?
they had probably 500-pound bombs.
So they were using as bombers then?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Definitely.
As level bombers, do you think? Or
No,
bombers?
they dive bombers. They had a moderate dive to them. They could withstand pretty good speed, but they were slow to begin with.
Yeah.
They were just a big target. A lot of them got shot.
How far
down.
off of the coast were you when you attacked Tokyo?
We were in the vicinity of Iwo Jima, so wait a minute. Now, when we brought that group up, we're in the task element that went north, looking for kamikazes, and we started with Tokyo, and we came back to Kyushu. So, in the early days, we went up there and attacked the offshore islands mostly. And so I was in on the island of Chichijima, the same place where George H.W. Bush was shot down.
And so he was flying a torpedo bomber.
He was flying torpedo bomber, but
Yeah.
that was 6 months earlier.
The reason I asked is we were having a discussion in the museum whether he was in an SBD or as a torpedo bomber. We couldn't remember.
No, he was in a TBM.
Yeah. Did you ever meet him?
Pardon?
Did you ever meet him?
No, I never did. But he's on the Avenue of Heroes with me.
Oh yeah. Oh, you're on the Avenue of Heroes. So, this island is loaded with you guys.
I know that. I know.
Fewer and fewer all the time, though.
Yeah, we're getting older and older.
So, okay, so on the strike to Tokyo, do you remember what ordnance you were carrying? Or were you the photo guy?
The one I remember most is the Chichijima, which is a side effect. See, what what we did, we had, our main target was Tokyo. They called it the Tokyo raids. I never went to Tokyo, but it was called the Tokyo raids. And my target was, when we went in there, our target for our particular flight happened to be Yokosuka.
Right.
But earlier or later, and I can't remember which, it was probably earlier, we went to Chichijima, which was a side diversionary tactic away from the main force, I think. We were on the diversionary force target. And guess what? We lost our skipper on that first flight.
Yeah, I see that.
He was killed. Apparently he was MIA, never found. So these were submarine pens up there. We were bombing those. That turned into a fiasco. And I'll tell you, the skipper of the ship, his name was Tomlinson, was mad on the wet hand that we didn't achieve our objective. We lost our skipper in the first run. And
did you see him? Did you see it?
no, I'm at the end. I heard about it later.
Were you,
JG,
were you doing a photo on that? Was that your mission, to be the photo there?
I think I was. I must have been, if I was there, yes. Because that was always my first mission. My first job was to fly over the target, join my group, come back, hit the target with the group, drop some bombs, go back to perch, and start over again, do the same run.
So did you...
So that was, you get the before and after.
Right. So on the first time you fly over a target, was there a lot of flak, people shooting at you, or airplanes?
Yes, but that was the job of my section leader staying behind me. You better jink, they're right behind you, they're tracking you.
Really?
But, or, I can't, I gotta keep it going, so you keep running no matter what. Then you break away and cob everything and get the hell out of there. And then you come into the actual bombing part, and then finish that, and then you go back on perch and you'd say, okay, it's time for me to go back and take that other picture. Now they're really mad. And their aim gets really good. I never fail to come back from any mission, any strike mission, no, I'll say, any strike mission I was on without being hit.
Oh, really?
I was never, sometimes I didn't know it, sometimes I did, but I never got knocked down. I was very fortunate. You'd find that the chief job of my photographer's mate was to look at the airplane and see how many holes were in it, count them, and then he'd say, yeah, there was a few 30 millimeters here and there. Whatever the Japanese used, it was smaller caliber. Usually it was small caliber stuff.
So this was from airplanes shooting at you, not from the ground?
No, the ground. It's all ground.
The bullets would go 10,000
I never got on the... I got into a hassle with on one flight I was on, where we ran out of cloud cover. One of our carriers was hit. It's somewhere in there in March.
When you got into an engagement with a Japanese airplane, what kind of was it?
These were the ones that I got into the real hassle with. That mission was designed to go in to protect from the ship that, what is the name of the carrier that was hit? Let's get that straight first before it's the Franklin. The USS Franklin was hit off the coast of Kyushu. And we went into Yontan East, which was a fighter base, not necessarily kamikazes. And they were good guys, they were good pilots. I went straight in with the flight. We were flying the thatch weave over the bombers. The torpedoes were under us, and this Pacific mission. And the torpedoes had a limited radar capability, and they picked up the target because we couldn't see them. We were over in the cloud bank. We were above the clouds. And then we dropped down at that point. Okay, the bombers went in, and then we went in right after them. to protect them. That was our job. So we got through the cloud cover, and there they were waiting for us. Zeros all over the place. I can't count how many there were. I was on 2 of them at least. I know I would see one start to shudder, and I'd move to another one. Finally, I was...
What do you mean shudder?
In other words, it'd been hit, and the aircraft started belching smoke.
So when your bullets hit,
I go out and get the. So I don't know how many I got. I didn't have the gun cameras on. I was all over the cockpit. Airplanes all around. It turns out the bullets started flying by my cockpit. Now they had tracers too. The Japanese did. So somebody was shooting at me. So I had speed. So I pulled my aircraft. This is when the formation broken. I don't know what's going on. I have no idea where everybody is. All I see are meatballs. And I pulled my aircraft into a vertical climb, running out of airspeed. Bad news, you don't do that. You trade airspeed for altitude maybe, but that's it. I finally got to the clouds and leveled off, and I settled down, got myself oriented and on instruments, turning toward home base because that's the only thing I knew to do. And this aircraft joins up on me in the clouds. He joins up on my starboard side. I look at him. He looks at me. Big meatball.
Jesus.
It was a Japanese Zero, and he pulled that way and I pulled that way. Big heroes, but anyway, he wasn't a kamikaze anyway. Guess what? I left there. I started down back toward home, flying down past Kyushu. Here's the first, and the next I ran out of cloud cover. I'm staying in the clouds just to keep myself from being discovered. I'm all alone up there. I had some bombs and I dropped them somewhere. I don't know where, and they'd put me in jail if they knew it. But anyway, I flew along, and then the next thing I knew, I was out of cloud cover. And there was the Franklin, leaning to starboard. She had a cruiser on the right and a destroyer on the left. And the next thing I knew, I was being shot at by F4Us, Corsairs. I went through the entire episode, and I had dropped my belly tank. I guess I neglected to tell you that. When we get into combat, we get rid of it.
Sure, of course.
Drag. And so I was flying along, and one of the recognition features in the F6F was the belly tank. So the Corsairs were pretty new in the area, apparently.
Right.
And I think they must have been Marines, because that's about the only ones flying Corsairs. And they pulled away, and they finally recognized me. And the leader of the flight of 4, came up with his formation, flew alongside of me. He gave me this, and I said,
"Sorry."
I remember it as clear as day. Thanks a lot, you guys. So I got off that.
What carrier did you go back to and land on then?
Belleau Wood. I got back to my ship.
So you just happened to overfly the Franklin.
And listen, what I told you, the whole squadron had landed 15 minutes before I got there.
Oh, really?
So I floundered. I must have been in the target area longer than they were, by a long way. And so, I mean, in the combat zone. So I got back to the task force, and I did the recognition turn. There's a recognition turn that you do every day.
I don't know what that means.
And they shot at me. So I got shot at with them. When I got back to the ship,
means when you're coming back, you circle to show you're not a kamikaze or something?
Yeah. Kamikazes were rampant. They were all over the place. And so they were trigger happy on the ships because things were happening all the time. And so in order to come back and penetrate the task force, because to join our carriers, which were in the center of the task force, we had to pass the screen, which were a bunch of destroyers. Very bad, poor communications. There was a right turn one day and a left turn the other. It's not much of a recognition turn, but the recognition turn of the day had to be right, I guess, or left, I don't know. And then I made my turn and then started in. They started shooting at me. And anyway, I got back to the ship and landed aboard, and the skipper's, you're as white as a sheet. Go on to your room. I couldn't have been more happy.
So how many combat missions do you think you flew?
How many are in there? Do you know?
No, I have no
Did I keep track of it? 38, I think.
You know you shot down two and a half.
Yeah, I got 2, and that happened on another day when we were on combat mission, combat air patrol off Okinawa, northern part of Okinawa. And the Japanese came down there in mass, kamikazes. 2 valves, very low altitude. I got 2 of them confirmed. I was pulling back in the formation. We cleaned out that bunch. And I was pulling back in the formation as the last man of a 12-man formation. And this 0 came down in front of us. Now I'm the last position. As you imagine, I'm in best position to get in the slot. Skipper practically spun in trying to get him to second, third. No, all 11 of them. Well, my section leader went somewhere. I don't know where he was. So I got in and picture perfect. Just like a hose. Those bullets went right into the root of that 0 and it went like that. That pilot never knew what hit him.
Now the question is how many did you get that you didn't get credit for?
What's that again?
How many did you get that you didn't get credit for, that nobody witnessed?
At least 3.
So you're
In that combat, the one I was telling you about where the Japanese joined up on me, I got at least 2 of those. 2 there. And I think I got another valve because they were sitting ducks.
So you should.
Where were the kamikaze flying out of anyway?
There was Kyushu.
Kyushu's the southern island, correct?
Yeah, it's the southern island. It's and it was their main base was Kyushu, Kanoya East.
And so you guys were actually going to, that's what you were looking for, was the kamikaze base that you wanted to hit.
That was on one mission. That's that mission. The other missions, we know where they were coming from. And that's pretty much where they were gathered. That's why we were going to that particular base that I'm telling you about where the lone Japanese joined up.
Right.
Okay, I was headed for there. Our job was to clean out the kamikazes on the ground before they got airborne.
So that was a matter of strafing more than anything else.
Yeah, it was not a big deal. It was a matter of strafing, that's correct.
Right.
And that's why the bombers were leading. Because they were loaded with the kind of bombs, probably 250s, I don't remember what they had.
So then they were going to bomb the airfield and you guys were just going to go
and we're going to
shoot
cover
the hell out
them
of it.
and also strafe anything we saw on the ground. I did that on...
Okinawa was April the 1st.
That's correct.
When you were on a combat mission, combat air patrol mission. So basically you were up there to defend against any kamikazes or fighters that would come to interfere. Was there much resistance?
Yeah, and I got hit. We saw I don't know if that was the same one, where I lost Bob Burns. I think that's listed.
Yes.
Did I say Bob Burns was lost?
He
was my section leader.
Right.
I was hit with in the drop tank. I didn't know where I was hit by a ship in the harbor, Japanese ship in the harbor of Naha. I was hit in the front strap of the belly tank, broke off as it turns out. It was flopping against the underside of the aircraft. So my aircraft was getting this kind of action.
So you just pick it up?
I didn't know what it was until Bob joined up on me. He says, "Hey, belly tanks. So I dropped it. You had a manual override. So I dropped it, and everything cleaned. Then I looked down. I had a lot of oil pressure fluctuation.
Oops.
And the leader.
Okay, stop. I got an important question. Oil pressure meaning you've had an oil line blowout or something like that, so you're going to lose all your oil. The engine's going to seize. When I talked to Diz Laird, he told me that the same thing happened to him on a mission in Okinawa. He was involved in a flight of 16, a section, and they came in, and he knew that if you flew either due east or due west from the mountain that was at the end of the runway, it would take you right straight down the runway. So anyway, he penetrated with another guy, went down through the weather, got under the clouds, saw a bunch of Japanese Zeros and shot them up, and then they came out. And as they climbed out, he could see the guy was trailing smoke, and he knew that the guy had lost oil line or something was on. So this is what I want to ask you about. He said, I told him to hold 3220, and you can fly all the way back to the ship.
Yeah, that one of the things you were taught to do is if you lose oil pressure is do not move your throttle around. Keep the same RPM, the same airspeed, the same altitude, or same. If you're flying, keep it there. If you start jazzing the throttle, you'll wind up drawing too much oil and you'll freeze the damn engine.
But the engine, but he used numbers though. He said, I think he said 3220, which I meant 2 pounds of boost and 2,000 RPM. I think is what he meant.
2,000 RPM would be pretty low, but 32 inches of manifold pressure probably is what he meant.
Yeah. F4 is on active duty, and I know what. I mean, I was never in combat, but I know what it just turns into a big furball with airplanes going all over the place.
You don't.
Who knows what happened, And the stories are the same. You come back and all of a sudden there's airplanes all over. Then 10 minutes later you're all by yourself, and where'd everybody go? So.
That's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
And I'm the last guy to land. And I thought I was leaving my friends behind. God, they left me behind.
Yeah,
who needs enemies when you have friends like that?
Yeah, I've had talked to a number of European war pilots, and it was the same way. Where did everybody go? I'm all by myself.
That's exactly what happened to me.
Yeah. Well, and everything spreads out. And
it does.
And it's in jets. It's even worse. Well,
of course, as you well know. Yeah, especially in Vietnam. I never got in a combat mission there. I was in the early phases. 64. But I was back there several times in Midway and the 7th Fleet.
So, what time we got? 12:25. I don't want to go too long. I think it might be worth coming back and talk to you about Vietnam at a different time.
Yeah.
Because this is such great stuff. I mean, you have such an incredibly clear memory.
Pardon?
You have an incredibly clear memory. And I know that this combat, things like combat kind of get etched into your memory. You probably never forget it, especially if you've talked about it other times.
Yeah, it's one of the things I had to research and putting some things together, so I put my thoughts together earlier.
This is another kind of off-the-wall question. You talked about being at Glenview and how the ready room, everybody was smoking.
Yeah.
I'm guessing you probably didn't smoke very much.
I didn't.
You know why I know that? Because you're still alive.
I know.
All the guys that I've talked to, they're in their 90s, either never smoked at all or not very much.
Wow.
I did. I was in that latter category. I didn't learn to smoke till I went in the Navy.
Yeah.
And I never smoked until I was 18. So that's too damn young anyway.
Everybody. I must have. You've got to be the 15th pilot in their 90s that I've talked to. All the same. Neither never smoked at all, or very little.
Got it under control, yeah.
Yeah. Probably during the war, and then after that going, it's enough of that.
It turns out that, and it was miserable in there. I'm telling you, I can remember to this day.
I remember the same.
No seats. That was a CVL, a converted cruiser. There were 12 of them, I think. I could be wrong there. It could be 10.
How many people on board?
about 3,000.
Okay.
We had, but the aircraft complement was usually 2 squadrons, and the senior commanding officer of the fighter squadron was always the air wing commander, as well as the skipper of the fighter squadron.
So you were like a Lieutenant JG the whole time? Or?
I was an ensign, then a JG. I made JG when I think I was 20 years old.
So, what was it like living on a carrier in these conditions during wartime? What was it like?
We had the best of everything. You know something? We had the only air-conditioned spaces on the ship.
Oh, really?
Actually, I guess probably the medics had a cooler spot for the surgery, but yeah, we had a air-conditioned ready room, and we practically lived there. But we slept in, and being an ensign, I was in the bunk room, but the bunk rooms weren't as big as they were in the Essex class. There were only 4 men in the bunk room. One experience I had by going back to bunk rooms is 4 of us pilots were in that one bunk room, and on one day we lost 2 of the 4.
Oh, man. What was that like?
And that was my, the other one, the remaining pilot, and I, the one pilot slept over me and the other one slept on the lower bunk on the other side, and carried the other pilot who was slept on the top bunk on the other side, on, we'll say, the port side of the room. He couldn't stand it, so he came over and climbed in the bunk over me. So the 2 of us be in the same room. So there was a lot of sadness too.
Did they know what happened to him?
Yeah, one of them got lost, and the other one was, I think, seen being hit by flak. And I can't remember what time that was. It was around the time between Iwo Jima and Okinawa. So it was one of our combat. We were doing a lot of snoop around the submarine patrols and long-range navigation things at that time. You know, it's interesting to note, but in our squadron we lost 15 of the 30 original pilots. 15. There were 30 pilots in the squadron, 15 were lost. Not all were the original of the 15 lost, so half of them were gone. But the 15 that were lost were made up of not only guys that started in the squadron, the left states in the squadron, but also replacement pilots that had come in from Guam. So these guys would, so you can't say that, you know, it was that we lost that many of people that we really knew. It was probably about 5 that were very close to me. The rest of them were all replacement.
So you said one guy got lost.
And there was a lot of,
how did he get lost?
a lot of navigation errors. You know, a lot of the loss of lives was traced to operational accidents. I guess in your flying experience, you had the same
Sure.
experience. It's almost always operational, even though you're in combat. The guys get lost, or they get...
Well, how did you navigate back to the ship?
It was strictly with navigation and YGZB.
There you go.
You've heard of that.
I've heard of it, but I never did understand it.
The ship, the designated ship at point option, which is the center of the task force, which takes over a lot of the ocean.
Oh, yeah.
It's like 10 miles wide. So it is somewhere in there. He has a, now let's see, wait a minute. No, each task element had one ship that had a YGZB frequency. YGZB is nothing more than an emission of a pulse that gives off a Morse code letter. Da-da for A, da-da-da-da for B, and so on, around the circumference 360 degrees of a compass. So if, say, and it would emit those signals from a gyroscopic arrangement where it would project the data in a certain quadrant. So if you received that signal, you knew you were in that quadrant. So you would fly a heading to the ship straight toward it. You'd had two ways of correcting, of figuring out whether you were right or not. Either you'd usually crank the sound way down to where it was almost impossible to hear and see if it built. You know you were getting closer.
Oh, man.
Really, that's the way it worked.
Oh,
It was pretty good too. I mean, you'd get inside of ships at least, whether they're yours or not, you weren't sure. But it was.
But then you could recognize your own ship.
And then you got the screen problem.
So
See,
now,
most of the flying done in World War II was done. If we were still talking World War II.
oh yeah,
Most of the flying done was done during the day.
right.
We did somewhere night flying. We had some night flying. We had night flying training, and we did do some night landings, but very little.
So when you go out, okay, you're going to launch and you're going to have your torpedo bombers are going to take off, and then the fighters take off afterwards, and then you all join at a certain spot.
Yes.
And then once everybody joins, then they all proceed at the same time.
Usually, in our case, we always used to circle a ship. It was the easiest way to do it.
Oh, really?
And pick an altitude. The torpedoes would be at, say, at 5,000 feet, we'd be at 8
Okay.
or 10 or whatever.
But
And we'd join up.
but your section was 16 ships generally, wasn't it? 16 airplanes.
Yeah, it could be. It would be dependent on the mission, of course.
Right.
We'll say at least 4 torpedo squad aircraft and at least 8 F6s, fighter aircraft. And they would join at a higher altitude because that's where they're going to be flying.
And when they start, then you guys would go into your
Yeah,
weave.
and
Or did you get to the weave when you got close to the
the
top?
guy that was in the lead torpedo plane was the leader.
Okay.
And so you took your position over him in that section, of the division. And you flew your thatch weave over him to make sure he was protected.
So now you're, say, 100 miles off the coast. So you're about 15 minutes, 20 minutes away from actually target. Now you hit the target. Now what?
Okay, the first one's to go into the bombers,
Okay.
and they haul ass.
So they go in at what altitude do they
They
start?
go in and make their drop and get out of there.
What altitude?
We hang around for a bit to clear the flak and do the stuff. And my section had to hold back for my photo mission. But the others would join the weave position again to protect the remaining bombers headed home. And you'd still fly the weave.
So you fly the weave, but then as a zero would come up or whatever, each person would kind of drop off to take on that zero and fight him down to the deck if need be, or chase him away.
The torpedoes would stay where they are, and of course they'd go after them. The Japanese were after them, of course. They weren't after us. They were after the bombers. But it was our job to keep them from getting there. If they got through, then the torpedo would know it, who was the leader. And he would say, hey, there's somebody still hanging around back here. And then we'd go. There weren't that many. In the days I was out there, it was pretty hard to find a Japanese aircraft that was very aggressive. It was mostly kamikazes.
They were kids.
They were just kids. And we made.
And here you guys, you had at least 400 to 500 hours at that time.
Oh yeah, most of us were up there. And see, at that time we were in pretty good shape. We had all the material that we needed to fight the war, and Japanese were on the wane. They couldn't build anymore. They didn't have access to raw material. So.
Oh, you mentioned, I see in this notes here that you mentioned going after the Baku family, or Baku.
The Baka bomb.
The Baka
bomb. That was one of my photo missions.
That was one of your what missions?
Photo missions, which I was the photo pilot for.
How did they know where it was?
I didn't.
How did they know?
That's
where
the point. We were on a mission to knock out kamikazes on a field. We went to the field, the target area, and I took pictures of the BDA going over the TriMet gear. I told you all
Right.
about that. I circled around during the flight. We went down. There wasn't anything there. I mean, we were looking for kamikazes, for crying out loud, and we couldn't find anything. So we kind of balled it. All we could do was getting shot at. It wasn't very much fun, so we didn't hang around. And I went back, took another picture, and sure enough, when I got back to the ship, when they developed the film, the air intelligence officer came and got me. And I remember distinctly, I was down in my room. He says, "Come on up, I want to show you." And he showed the picture of the Baka bombs coming out of
Oh, wow.
this mountain, the mound that was in the one edge of the airfield.
It was a jet flying bomb. That's what it was.
my
It was
God.
it was a pulse jet bomb. It's actually a glide bomb
Glide bomb.
with a let's see, did they have? I don't think they had any power at that
I thought they
time.
did.
And
I think it had power. There's one
they
in
were latched to the underside of a Betty, and they were used. It dropped off, and they had a suicide pilot inside.
Yeah, they have one at the Smithsonian.
He had some kind of a power, I think, but I don't. You look at the Baka bomb, I'm sure you'll find a picture of it.
Like I say, they have a real one, and they're big, actually big. So that's what you do, and you didn't even know it when you were.
I didn't know I had found the factory.
And that was at Kyushu.
That was on the island of Kyushu, and somewhere in there, and I can't think of the name of the island. But later I heard from someone that the B-29s had gone and bombed the crap out of that
That'll take
place.
care of that. Yeah.
So
Wow.
I did something decent. Nobody ever mentioned it to me. It
Wow.
never again was, I got no recognition or anything for it. And that got lost. It isn't that they wouldn't have, they didn't even think about it.
Yeah.
It wasn't that important.
Yeah. Well, I don't think they were all that effective anyway. So, but maybe because they were bombed, they never got a chance to be. very
They
effective.
weren't, we got them in time, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they were using them toward the end. And they could load two of them, as I understood, on a Betty. I have a picture somewhere in that pile of a Betty with a Baka bomb underneath
Oh,
it.
really? It says your last Capt flight was June the 10th, and at that point you had 910 hours. Man, you got a lot of time in a short period of time.
we were flying around no, it wasn't around the clock, obviously.
Well, okay, so let's talk about, you returned from a mission. Now, when you returned from one of these missions, there had to be just airplanes like all over the place. Where the formations must have been all broken up to hell. So,
No, they usually get joined up in some kind of a decent position. If you lost a guy or two, you'd count. The leader would count on. He'd get his flight together, and they.
so then would he call the ship and tell them we're coming in, or?
Yeah. Well, you're already scheduled. If you don't show up, you're out of gas.
Okay.
See, there was no offing at that time, and
Didn't they have some Catalinas out there flying around?
they were just to pick you up. You went in the water.
Yeah, that's what I mean. But that's what they were for.
Oh yeah. If you went we had those, and we also had submarines. We knew where they were.
Yeah.
They were usually at the coast, Kyushu Bay, usually at the mouth there, just where you were coasting out.
Okay.
We would come back to the carrier task force and then get a clearance to go to our ship, and we'd go to our ship and then we'd be picked up by them, usually with visual signals,
Now, how much?
lights.
So who would land first, the bombers or the fighters?
The last to land would be the fighters.
Okay. So when the fighters came in, you guys land. They pull your airplane out. You jump out, and then you go to debrief, right?
Go down to the ready room right away.
And what was it like in the ready room?
Hell breaking loose. I mean, debriefing was taking place in a corner we had one air intelligence officer, and he was debriefing already. He'd been a college professor, so it was kind of interesting. But he would he would debrief every pilot eventually. And it'd go by seniority. And they'd usually pick up the flight leaders, what went on, and he would describe what happened and who we lost or didn't lose, what happened at the target area. And the air intelligence officer would ask him questions like, was there any flak and where was it? And they usually wouldn't know. And it was, we would, any strange things happening, and we did see smoke in some of the traces. We thought that was symbolic. Turns out not to be anything.
But how did the guys, I mean, after coming back from a combat mission, I can't imagine how you guys could calm down enough to
We didn't.
sleep that night. Did they give you a shot of whiskey or anything like that?
Yeah, the doctor would give us a shot of brandy
Yeah.
if he thought we needed it. And we all needed it because the doctor was a member of our squadron. If he didn't walk it over, he was going to be given a bad time that night at the mess. So
Well,
yeah, you'd get a shot of brandy if you weren't going on another mission. Now you may have another one.
Really?
And quite often that happened. You would have one in the morning, a light one, maybe a Capt, where you're flying over the ship or somewhere else.
Right.
Or it might be a strike in the afternoon or vice versa. You could, or a search mission. Search missions were kind of a exercise in training in how you could navigate.
Search mission to look for down guys,
Yeah.
down pilots. Were
Any
those
submarine.
ever successful, or?
No. But they were good for navigating. I don't know. We found some things. I never found anything. I don't remember anything important.
It's hard to. I was actually when I was in the reserves, we flew C-130 search missions, and it's tough to find anything in the ocean.
Yeah, in the ocean,
It's big.
it's hit or miss. I mean, there's nothing to.
Get
there
a few
was-
white caps in there, and man, you can't see it.
We lost one of our pilots. I'm trying to think of that on a search mission like that. I've forgotten which one it was. They had several kinds names for him, but it was to Taiwan, because we were worried about the Japanese going in there and the Chinese were getting a little upset. So we were, and one of the guys that we lost, a guy by the name of Thomas, was lost on that mission. We don't know what happened to him. So that was one of the things we do. We'd go and look at coast of, say, China, see if we could figure out if anything was happening. We'd have all of 10 minutes maybe there. And
One of the fellows I talked to a couple of years ago, he was flying P-47s. He was an Army pilot, and they were flying. This was in August in '45, and they were flying a they call it a fighter sweep. 16 airplanes lined abroad,
oh yeah,
hitting the coast at Kyushu, and anything that they could see, they just shot the hell out of it, right? And so they did this on August the 8th, and as they came in, they flew right over Nagasaki.
Oh no.
And they went, my God, what's going on? Why haven't the bomber guys got this place? You know, here's this perfect city. They didn't fly on the 9th, but they flew the same mission on the 10th, and they flew right over Nagasaki again and said, what in the
it's
hell?
gone. Yeah,
And they had no, they knew a bomb had been dropped, they didn't know where. And it was, they said they were all flying around in circles at about 4,000 or 5,000 feet.
see, I was home by then.
Oh yeah, you were, yeah. So you left in,
So what did I say? I forgot.
so now did you have much to do with the bomber guys?
The SBDs? No, only the torpedoes.
The torpedo guys, I meant.
But, oh yeah, we were good buddies. You know, we kind of felt sorry for them.
Why is that?
Well, they were such big targets. Jesus, they were.
By that time they were flying the SB-2C, right?
No, they were flying the TBM.
TBM, oh yeah.
That was the
That had 3 people in it, right?
Yes,
The guy in the middle was a radio, and the guy in the back was a gunner.
right. Those ensigns didn't know what the hell they were doing up front.
Well, I only talked to one guy that flew them, and how they did it. It was not easy to try and hit a ship, because the ship's going like this, and you got to aim over here someplace, to get the ship. And
That's
then
right.
you end up flying right over it, you know.
Well, it turns out that gunnery was the same thing, only in a little faster action. That shot I'm talking to you about against that zero that I'm sort of proud of was,
Well, describe it with your hands. Tell me what you were doing. You're a pilot. You're supposed to talk with your hands. Where were you and where was he?
okay, we're all climbing into position to rejoin after we hit all those valves down on the deck, and they all had been either destroyed or accounted for, and we were just rejoining the flight, and the skipper's at the front. I remember I'm the last guy to join up. Somehow I get in the last positions where I belong, and my section leader was there, so I joined on him and joined the division leader, and we were just in that position when this zero came from above us at a very high rate of speed, straight down toward the ships. I don't think the Japanese had the capability, put it another way, I don't think they would waste a zero on a kamikaze. So my thinking is he was not a kamikaze. He may have been the leader who was controlling the kamikazes, and he'd lost all of his aircraft and he might have been coming down to check and see what had happened. But that was my thought in later years. But he's coming straight down like this, a perfect 90-degree deflection shot when I got into position. And I pulled 150 mils, which was what I estimated his speed to be, and which was related to the speed he was at and the distance I was in position to fire, and I fired. The full spot, it's just looked like that. Of course, I'm pulling G's to stay on. It looks like the bullets are just going right into his wing road. There was nothing to track the sight. There was no gyroscopic arrangement to track the flight. It was all eyeball and training and gut feeling and feeling for shooting a rifle.
I've seen a lot of the things I've read about, you know, fighter pilots that became aces. A lot of them were country boys that had a lot of experience shooting birds and learning how to lead targets.
Well, they had a range here in North Island, skeet shooting.
Right.
And I learned how to, I never fired a shotgun before that. And I learned it all from that. It was very, I mean, to take off and you shoot it
Yeah.
on the wing like that.
Well, that's what Diz Laird was talking about, because you know, if a guy's in a really hard turn and he's doing 300 knots, you got to shoot way the hell out of here someplace.
Yeah,
to
and
get
you
down
are.
to him. Yeah.
That's exactly what you're doing.
Yeah.
And you took the mills from your time. I forgot what it was. The computation was based upon the estimated speed. We were taught. We had the reflective sights.
Right.
They were hard right on the top of the
Right.
cockpit.
Didn't you have some sort of a reticle that would show a certain size, though? I mean, some sort of an aiming.
Yeah, the reticle you could expand or contract.
There you
That's
go. That's
correct.
what it is, yeah.
And I can't remember how that worked, but it was the Hellcats we had in that day, though, at that time were set,
Right.
and you did. What you're describing is what we did to try to
Right.
estimate our range.
Right. So was there
they'd fill 100
was there a
mil.
pipper that would depress as you
So
pulled G's, the pipper would drop down or depress?
yeah,
at all?
you would pull G's to get him the nose of his aircraft or whatever part of the
There you go. Okay.
And then when you're in range, and the range was calculated based upon the size of the target,
Right.
which you just described. And I
Right.
can't remember
Right.
exactly how that went mentally, because I never did that after that.
So the Hellcat had what, 650 calibers?
Yes, but that was another thing. In my aircraft, I had Dog 24. D was the name side number of our aircraft, and I had D24. Actually, I was the most junior guy in the whole squadron. So Dog 24 was a little heavy, I thought, with all that camera gear in there, because it was a photo aircraft.
Right, yeah.
It had that Trimet gear in there. So I took 2 guns out.
Oh,
So I
wow.
only had 4.
How much, oh, I forgot what I was going to say.
You had 6 guns in you.
Yeah, yeah.
And you'd run out of ammunition too. You could select the guns. You had a switch. And I've forgotten where that was. There was a way to select your guns, 2 at a time.
Yeah.
I mean,
How
you
much
wouldn't
did
want to fire one on
When you
one
fire,
side,
when
one on
you,
the other.
if you fire all 6 guns at once,
They're
how much did it slow the airplane down?
not bad.
Really?
They're 20 millimeter. It wasn't the slowdown so much, was the speed I needed. See, I wanted to get my ass out of that target area as fast as I could, especially the second time around.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, they were really upset by that time.
Well, sure.
And,
Here he comes again.
and I'm the only plane, I'm the only target in the area, so I'm a little bit antsy. So
Was there any, there was no coordination with the Army at all, was there?
it probably was at the higher level, had to be,
Yeah,
but we didn't know about it.
yeah.
And you're right. When we got in the target area, we were surprised to see somebody was there. And
Why did you leave in June? I mean, the war still had some serious months ahead of it. I'm surprised your ship left in
well,
June.
it turns out they had somebody ready to go, and we went into a typhoon at that in between there. That's in there somewhere.
Yeah, I see it.
A lot of ships were beat up, and it became
How
convenient.
far are you out to sea?
We're out in Okinawa, in the Philippines.
How far out from the islands? What? I'm just trying to get a reference on where in the heck it was when
It was right. We'll say Okinawa. That's where we were operating at that time.
right.
It was just about secured, but we were. The war was about over. We knew it.
Did the typhoon? Did you know the typhoon?
The typhoon. Oh, that was Bull Halsey, that jerk. Excuse me. I hope that isn't being taped, because
It is.
he should have. He should have known. He put that task force in the damnedest.
What was it like?
I was upside down for 4 days.
What?
We were in it for 4 days. The only Purple Heart I would ever get would be from the typhoon. When the typhoon occurred, we couldn't fly, because our ship would list 20 degrees to port and hang there and hang there and hang there and hang there. We weren't sure it was going to go over, and then it would finally come back. I'm in my bunk, where it's about the only place you can live, and it had an angle like this, a metal angle on the edge of the bunk,
Right.
in the lower bunk, and I flipped over somehow in one of the waves. See that scar?
Oh yeah.
That's where I got it.
That's your Purple Heart, huh?
That's my Purple Heart scar. My tooth came through, and Dr. Frank looked at it. He says, "I'm not a dentist, but I'll fix you up." He scraped off the tooth, which is a little jagged.
So it was 4 days worth of.
Of hell. It was. We couldn't. We took everything we could down below, in the lower decks. In other words, a lot of
Shift.
torpedo planes got loose and banged up each other.
Lower the center of gravity, right?
Yeah, we lowered the center of gravity. And the ship captain even had us all go as low in the ship as we could, we people, the crew. And there were ships all around, all over the place. Pittsburgh's lost her bow. I remember seeing that. And I was in the, you've heard the term hurricane bows?
Mm-mm.
Well, maybe you haven't. If you hear it, it's based on that hurricane, that typhoon. The bows themselves caved in the way the original Essex carriers were built,
Right.
and it folded over like that, made them inoperable. They couldn't launch aircraft off them, so it had to go back home.
Oh wow.
And so those ships were forming up to go home, and it was a convenient way to get us out of there and get the new guys in.
Oh, I see.
And so the new guys were flown into Guam took over our airplanes and our aircraft and continued flying. They got new ones. Ours were pretty beat up.
So then you sailed out of there and recovered where, back up in Washington then? I mean, when you left, I mean, where do you go when you left the war zone?
We came back to San Diego. I remember Dr. Frank and I standing on the hangar deck. He says, "Point penis erectus." I says, "Doctor." And we'd been out there 5 or 6 months or something like that. Point Loma, so I remember it that way. Doc Frank and I were good friends.
That's a good one.
I love that guy.
That's a good one.
He called it point penis.
Well, I'm sure there was a lot of young ladies looking for you guys anyway. So, now, where were you when the atomic bomb was dropped?
Home. I was visiting with my folks. I was on post-deployment leave, and I danced in the street with my sister.
Wow.
In downtown Chatham.
Wow. Wow. But then you stayed until September '46.
I was trying to make up my mind whether to go regular Navy, and I didn't want to get out. I could have gotten out right away because DFC was enough to get me out early. And so I hadn't made up my mind about a career, and then I saw the likelihood of my ever getting promoted if I stayed without an education. So I decided to get out, get my degree, and then come in later, which is what I did.
Okay, well let's stop here. Okay, can I come back again?
Sure.
Maybe. It's Ron Carrico again, and it's April the 12th, 2018, and we're here in Coronado, California with William Buck Rogers. By the way, who gave you that name, Buck?
I got it in pre-flight school, and I don't remember the person who gave it to me, but it was a natural at the time.
Well, still is.
Because of the comic strip character then.
Yeah, I guess he's not around anymore. No one would know who that is these days.
I don't know who gave it to me.
Anyway, we're continuing a conversation from 2 weeks ago because we've sort of ran out of time, and you had such great stories to tell about World War II. But the last thing I wanted to ask is I wanted to be specific about the Hellcat airplane.
Yes.
You flew it about, what, 600-700 hours, didn't you?
Yeah, it was somewhere close to 1,000, that's for sure.
Really?
I never did add up the numbers.
Yeah, I think when you left, when you came back to the States, I think you said you had 900 and some hours. So you had about 400 hours, 500 hours of combat time.
At least.
Yeah, wow.
It was all pretty long periods of time in the air, like 3 or 4 hours. We were in the air longer than they do today with jets. So it was a case of a lot of hours and hours of boredom interrupted by moments of stark terror.
Well, you talked about shooting down 2 valves, and you talked about 2.5 valves, and you talked about joining up with coming out of a cloud next to a Japanese airplane.
Yeah, that was in one of the fighter sweeps we made into Japan.
So when you did a fighter sweep in Japan, what did you do? What was
Our fighter sweeps were more in support of the Air Force, I think. Our fighter sweeps were specific targets. It's a misnomer in my way of thinking because I don't remember going wing to wing and flying down highways and shooting everything in sight. It was done by specific targets that are picked out by Halsey and his gang or whoever was giving us the orders in our particular task group.
Did you go in as a 4-plane formation, or how did you do it?
Did what?
How many people, how many airplanes together?
Usually it was no less than 8, usually 12, and sometimes if we needed bombs, we'd bring the torpedoes with us, and there'd be another 6 of them or 8 of them.
And when you say
it's usually in pairs.
The TBMs is what you mean.
The TBM is the Avenger, yeah.
And the way you did that is you flew cover for them because they're so slow.
That's correct. And it was the thatch weed that I described that
Right.
provided us with the kind of cover that was very, very, very efficient.
And the bombers made one pass and then left.
Yeah, they made one pass and went home.
And then you guys stayed around and strafed
And
everything?
we'd stick around and usually mix it up with whatever's down there. It could be, when the bombers had finished, we would come back, reform, take a look, release the bombers to go home, and then we'd go down and do a little more strafing, whatever needed to be done to clean up the target area.
What would be a typical target?
Airfields, because we were looking for kamikazes.
All right.
I never went on anything except when the Yamato came down from up north.
And so you were involved in the attack on the Yamato?
I was in on the attack of a Yamato, but I never did see it. We were in a cloud cover the whole time. And I was flying wing and had a hard time sticking with him. So I'll tell you that I did not see it, but I heard him talking about it later, and our torpedoes got into it big and heavy.
So why are you in the clouds?
Because the cloud level was so low. I
Oh.
can't particularly give you any other reason. What happened in the Yamato situation was the ship came out of the ways. See, we had been trying to knock off the Yamato for quite some time. She was being under construction. And if you read the book on the Yamato itself, which is written by the Japanese that survived, you'll find out that they manned that with people from the Naval Academy and wherever they had human bodies to man it. So it got underway unbeknownst to us. It was on its way before we even got word of it, and we weren't prepared for it. We went to GQ immediately, and we were given an airplane and a mission of nothing more than follow your leader. And someone, I think, was in charge and held complete control at the target area, but I never witnessed that. I don't know if that was true. But in my particular case, I found out we were going to go, we were actually pretty much east of the target of the Yamato.
It was going to Okinawa, wasn't it?
We were close to Okinawa.
I mean, wasn't that where the Yamato was trying to go?
That's where the Yamato was. I read later that the Yamato was headed down there to run aground and put her guns in play for
really?
the war in the ground war in Okinawa.
So what month was that?
It was a suicide mission.
So it was March or early April?
It had to be April because the invasion of Okinawa was April 1st. Do I have a date there?
It just doesn't say. I'm looking at it. You got April 1st, and invasion of Okinawa was on combat air patrol mission that day and observed the landing. Our task force 58 was close to Okinawa,
Yes.
but you don't mention it in here.
The Yamato was later. Of course, that can be established, but yeah, she came in there because she was trying to support the invasion of Okinawa was going well for us in a way, and the Japanese knew it, and they had a suicide mission. About all they could do with their brand new battleship was run it aground and use it as support guns for the troops that were remaining.
They weren't giving up easy, were they?
They weren't, and I'll tell you what, I even got home later in the war after it was before the war ended, and I was home on my post-deployment leave, and I was asked the question about whether or not the Japanese would give up, and I said no. They'll never give up. They're pretty strong people, and they're going to continue the war as long as they got till the last person standing.
So the entire time you were over there, you never were on land at all then? You were on the carrier the whole time?
Yes, I was on the carrier the whole time. I never went ashore, and Naha was the only airfield we had. I did some strikes in our Naha area, but that was it.
Your son told me they found a picture of you landing with only one wheel on the carrier.
Yeah, and it strikes me that it was a maintenance problem, even though it was done on, that landing was made on the day I was over Okinawa. I don't think I was hit by flak. Later on they found out it was just a maintenance problem and some rust.
Oh, wow. How
Some
did you
corrosion.
how did you know the gear didn't go down?
I had an instrument in my cockpit that told me,
Yes.
and that was part of the landing procedure. You would, if you had okay, at that time we didn't check the gear, but the LSO saw it. If you didn't, but I knew it was. I had problems with it right from the get-go.
I think in pilot training we had to say, you know, gear down and check pressure up, full stop, or touch and go or whatever. So you would actually have to, oh yeah, look, it's down.
And you looked at it, you said to yourself, well, is that working or is it for real? And I had it, I can't remember the exact procedure, but normally, as I recall, I flew by the ship and they took everybody on board to have a look. They says, yeah, it's dangling.
So did you must have landed last then, is that
That's
right?
exactly right.
And you kept it on the carrier deck though.
I was going to tear up the carrier deck no matter what, and I guess Captain, I give him a lot of credit. He let me keep that one gear down. Probably would be better. It would have been just as easier on the ship, less damage to the ship if I kept my gear up, because it would retract, but it wouldn't extend.
But then you would have injured your camera.
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
Could have.
it could have. That's for sure.
Yeah. What do you remember the date?
It was April 1st.
Oh, okay. Okay. So then they repaired that airplane. They didn't switch out your airplane then.
I don't know if if I had a photo mission at that time or not. I can't remember. I think I probably did, being the first day.
Well, but they did repair they didn't just push it over the side. Or,
Yeah, it got pushed over the side.
Oh, it did.
Yeah, in the process, that starboard wing that on the collapsed side bent just enough to
It
where they
looked like it was
couldn't
bent, yeah.
mess with it.
So then they had to make a new camera plane for you then.
I don't think I was in my camera plane.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I'd have to look at the number on the side of the aircraft. What number is it? 24?
So you got out. It says you're promoted to Lieutenant JG on May 45, and then you stayed in for a while.
Yeah, I was trying to decide whether I wanted to stay in the Navy. I loved to fly, and I loved the carrier aviation part of it so much that I wanted to make a career out of it. But I had to look around. It took me about a year of doing odd jobs in Quonset Point, Rhode Island, where I was assigned close to home. And I was doing personnel work and releasing sailors and doing things like that.
And you had been a lieutenant at that point, right?
Lieutenant JG.
Lieutenant JG.
Yeah, I got out when I was still a JG.
So then it said released to inactive duty September 46, and then joined a reserve squadron.
Yes.
It's Squantum, Maine. I've never heard of Squantum.
Quantum Mass, Massachusetts.
MA, Mass. Yeah. VME. Now, the Korean War started in '51, didn't it?
Yes, it did. And in the meantime, I'd gotten a degree in Bachelor's Administration, Business Administration.
Well, didn't they call and remind you that you still had a commitment and say, come on back, or?
No, I asked to come back.
You did?
I did. And they said, sure, we can get you in. We'll take you to, they sent me to Norfolk, Virginia, and I checked in at Com Air Land. It was called Com Air Land in those days, for further assignment. And I was assigned to Oceana, Virginia to develop, pick up and commission a new squadron called F8F, and it still exists today. So I was part of the I'm a plank owner with VF-84 in Air Group 8. And we had the whole air wing there.
So when I interviewed Jerry Coleman a few years ago, he said he was, he got out, and they called him up and said, "We need you back again." And he said, "I'm out." And they called him captain, and he said, "Well, I'm lieutenant." And they said, "Well, we still own you," because he was a Marine. They hadn't trained any more Marine pilots, and so they pulled him back in again.
Yeah, it happened all around me. Yes.
But they didn't pull you back in.
No, it turns out they pulled me back in, but I actually volunteered.
Ah, okay.
So it helped their job a little bit.
Okay, now the most exciting part of the interview here for me. What's it like to fly a Bearcat?
The Bearcat is just the greatest prop airplane I ever sat in. I'll tell you what, it was so powerful that you couldn't use full power on takeoff.
Really?
Because you couldn't hold it down. It would prop. You had to kind of manhandle it to get it in the air. And once it was in the air, you could power it up and get yourself. You'd go to 10,000 feet in about 10 seconds.
Yeah, I know it held it.
1,000 feet a second.
It held the time to climb record. I know that for quite a while.
It would just, but it would. After that, it was pretty much. It was stable. It was a good gunnery platform. It was modern, but it was too late in the war. I wish we'd had it when we were instead of the Hellcat.
How would you compare it to the Hellcat?
Much more powerful. Had a four-bladed prop. It had a wider landing gear. It was easier to maneuver, but it was terribly overpowered, for the size of the aircraft. So you had to.
Was it lighter than the Hellcat?
Yes, I'll venture to say it was, but I can't specify how much.
And how many guns did it have?
Let's see, how many did we have? I think it was 4, but it's 20 millimeter.
Oh, they're 20 millimeter. Oh, okay.
And I'm a little bit unsure of that. We only had that for, say, 2 or 3 months until we got our Panthers. So it was a very short time that we were flying that aircraft. At that time, I was the maintenance officer in the squadron, transferring. We had F4Us, we transferred those out. We got the F8Fs as an interim aircraft, and then we moved up to the Panther.
Now the F4U,
after about 3 or 4.
Help me out. It's the F4U is the Corsair, right?
F4U is the Corsair, yeah.
So you flew the Corsair too?
I flew that when I was in the reserves, but I didn't have the Corsair on active duty.
Well, what was it like? I mean, I guess I've talked to a few people who've flown Corsairs. But
The birdcage was the first of the vintage, and they were terribly difficult because you had no vision forward at all.
Okay.
I don't know how they ever did that. I mean, it was because you had to keep turn, and for instance, if you were coming into a carrier, you had to be turning all the way, or you couldn't see the LSO toward the end of your approach, because if you straightened out, you couldn't see. So it was
because of the length of the nose.
because of the length of the damn nose.
Yeah.
And it was, but on the ground, you had to maneuver, back and forth. You turn, S-turns is what you used.
Yeah.
The taxi, go down the taxiway so you could see
Yeah.
what was ahead of you. But the Corsairs that I flew were 2. The F4U-4, which was a later version of the F4U,
Right.
and the FG-1D, which was made by Goodyear, which was a 3-bladed prop version, and was much better airplane. The cockpit was much farther forward, and it was a lighter aircraft, and it was a little bit less power, but it was more maneuverable than the old
Well, they had
F-44.
2,800 engines in them, didn't they?
Yes.
So what did the Bearcat have?
The Bearcat had I think it had the R2800. Wait a minute. Bearcat had something more than that.
Might have been 3,350.
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. But
So what would the landing speeds be of the Bearcat and the Corsair?
about the same. They'd be landing, your approach speed would be around 85 knots.
Oh, is that all, really?
Yeah. They did a good job of building that airplane aerodynamically.
Yeah.
To fit into the pilot's needs. Because we had enough change trying to, with the cockpit, have to try to fly the airplane through a different air school.
So you did. So the
Airfoil.
Bearcat and the Hellcat are Grumman airplanes,
Yes,
and then you go to the Corsair, which was a Vought airplane,
chest fought, yes.
and then you go from that to.
Panther, which is back to Grumman.
Yeah, no, the Bearcat was built by.
Yeah, that was made by Grumman.
That was another Grumman. Oh, okay. All right. Okay, now, so let's see. So basically, when you're in the reserves, you were flying it for about 3 months or so, but maintenance officer, you probably did fly it a hell of a lot then.
Well, I did, because I had to do a lot of test flying, and I had to learn early, and in order to keep the operational people happy.
What'd you do in a test flight? Describe a typical test flight in the Bearcat.
First of all, you take a look at the yellow sheet to make sure that everything's okay, which it usually is. Go out and check it out and make sure that it's okay. Go through your checklist. Make sure that your battens are off and everything.
Your what?
Battens that they use to brace the airfoils, the ailerons and the rudders.
Okay.
And
So I'm looking at your logbook here, and it seems like the day that you landed with one gear down was after the Capt, and it says invasion of Okinawa, but it doesn't say anything about the gear, but it shows you were flying. Well, you flew a number of different airplanes.
they have side numbers, but they're not logged in the logbook. They only have the bureau number and the type of aircraft.
So you didn't have your name on the side of the airplane or anything like that?
No.
In the Pacific.
It's an island in the Pacific.
Oh.
Not Cape Cod.
It says Kai.
K-I-K-A-I.
Kaikai.
Kaikai.
Kaikai Island. That was one of the Miyako.
How many hours did these airplanes have on them when you came back? I mean, I know you turned them over to somebody.
Well, I don't know. We turned them over to somebody else, and I don't remember much.
Well, they were probably never designed to last more than a couple thousand hours, I wouldn't imagine.
Boy, they take a lot of punishment, I'll tell you. Yeah, that's right. It probably is right. I don't ever remember when wearing out on us. It's simply weak.
Did you have G meters on them?
Have any what?
G meters.
No, we did not.
And G suits?
No. Well, yes, we did. Yes, we did. We did have G suits.
So how many G's would you
trying
think?
to transition into jets.
Yeah. How many G's do you think you would pull? Maybe 5, 6?
Oh, you could pull. I almost pulled the wings off one. Now, how did he know that? One of the maintenance officers told me I must have pulled about 12 G's, but
Popped rivets, probably.
it bent the wings.
How
It would handle 8 or 9 G's pretty easily.
Yeah,
But the pilots can only handle about, well, as you know, 8 G's is about
Yeah, that's about it. Yeah.
all you to be able to
And your
have
sight goes,
anything like. Yeah, your vision kind of gets into one spot. But
I had a guy, I was playing golf with a guy one day, you probably know him, and he said he flew Bearcats. World War II pilot, flew Bearcats, and he said he had one go supersonic one time.
you probably could, but it would be hard to do. Bumping through might be a little bit of difficult.
Well, you'd think...
You'd have to be in a straight dive.
Yeah, well, I said, how did you know? And he said, my crew chief told me, or the tech rep told me. And I said, you know, you didn't have anything that would read Mach 1. So, I mean, you could maybe 500 or 550 or something like that, yeah.
We had them in the Panthers and the jets, we had them, but...
And the Panther, you probably couldn't go Mach 1 in it either, could you?
No, you couldn't. You could get the F9, F8, I flew that later, and the F9, F8 would go through Soundberry, but you had to be in a pretty steep dive, at least 45 degrees, and full power, and not over land, please, because the sonic boom would scare the natives.
Oh, God.
But we only did that just to learn what it was like.
Did Now, I had a P-47 pilot tell me that, you know, people said they could go supersonic, but the trouble was is you'd just lose control. You couldn't pull out. And it was because of the way the tail worked. The sonic wave would get over the tail section of the airplane and you'd lose control.
Very possible.
And so, and the way they got around it with going Mach 1 is when the co-pilot on the B-29, Jackie Tinsley, I think his name was, realized that Yeager had just lost all control at .92. He said nothing happened. You know, just so anyway, what they figured is they could change the incidence of the tail, the entire tail. And when they did that, and they put a trim motor in it, and he just controlled the trim and got the thing through the sound barrier.
That's the way they do it now. That's
Yeah.
the way we did it with the F9, F8.
Yeah, the flying tail they call it. Yeah.
The
And the F-86, and that's why the F-86 was so much better than the MiG, because the F-86 had a flying tail and they could go through the sound barrier.
flying tail, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the flying tail's what was developed out of the Panther
Yeah.
into the Cougar.
But he told me that he said what they finally figured out. This was toward the end of the war. Actually, he was an Army Air Corps pilot in Okinawa, and he said he trained in the P-47 back east, up northeast someplace. And he said what they finally figured out is if you do get into an extraordinarily high rate of speed, once you get down to lower altitude, you know, you pull the power back, and lower altitude, the thicker air, it'll start slowing the airplane down, and then you can pull out. So they did it a couple times just to see. You'll push the nose over, gas it, see how fast it'll go, and then just let it sit there and pull the power back, and you can just fly it out.
Just flew itself out, huh?
Yeah, and he says so many times people would just say, "Yeah, I can pull hard enough," and they usually make a big hole in the ground somewhere, you know.
Yeah, the sound. I didn't have too much experience with anything beyond the speed of sound, but I punched through it a couple of times with the F9, F8. The 84 would probably go supersonic, but it wasn't something we needed to do.
Yeah, a friend of mine flew the A4. He said he tried it straight down. He said it just kept tucking under. He couldn't make it go through the barrier.
I think that was a lesson learned the hard way.
Yeah. Well, the F4. I flew the F4, and the sound barrier was nothing. You know, you'd lower the nose and
And you got a flying tail.
You'd be supersonic and like that. You know.
Yeah, and you got all that power. Boom, you're through.
Yeah.
I never experienced that. Never did.
I flew a test hop one time on a weekend in Germany. It was on a Sunday, and I was in the back seat. The other guys in the front seat, and I'm looking down, and he's diving. I'm going, "What are you doing?" I'm working on Mach 1.2 or 3. He says, "If the bastards are going to make me fly on Sunday, I'm going to boom the base."
So he's
cool.
He's gives them give them a little taste of their own medicine.
Okay, so now you're flying the Bearcat. That must have been a real shame to lose that flight.
Yeah, but of course we were getting into jets. See, that when I checked in with Airland, I says, "Look, I volunteered now. Give me a better job than the others." I didn't say that, of course. I wouldn't do that. But the point is that I got it across that I wanted to go to a jet squadron.
Right.
Because it's fairly new. Now it's 1952. And so they said, "Yeah, you're going to get one, but we don't have it right away." Yeah, I've heard that before. In my experience, they'll give you anything to get you out of the office and not to get on with their next customer. So, yeah, I took it and I said, "Okay, we got this reserve squadron coming back from Korea, and it's going to be disbanding, and they're going to leave their airplanes with you. That's going to be the skeleton and the beginning of the F-84. And that's what happened. They gave us a bunch of airplanes.
F-84.
So badly, the F-4, gave us F-4Us.
Oh.
They were all so badly corroded that you couldn't use them. They all had to be junked. And the squadron came back, and it was full of lieutenants. Everybody's lieutenant. Reserve squadron from, where was it? Missouri. St. Louis. The St. Louis squadron. And they had, the skipper was lieutenant, exec was lieutenant, and the lowest Indian on the team was the lieutenant. They're all lieutenants. And they all quit the minute they got home. They were sick and tired of it. They were going to get out. So I was left with the skeleton force. I had a chief and about 3 or 4 other guys. We started putting VF 84 together.
Oh, okay.
So that's when we got assigned the F8s.
The F8s, okay. And so you got June 52 is formed VF 84.
84, yeah.
And then, so later on, it doesn't say when you transitioned to the Panther. So how did they transition you to the Panther jet?
It was kind of a catch-all thing. We had some training. We had one pilot that checked into the squadron early. Turns out later he became an admiral. I think of his name, but he was an ensign, and he'd had some jet experience. He did T-33 experience, and we had one of them. If you remember the T-33, it has 2 seats.
Absolutely.
So I learned my first flying in a jet from this ensign up front in the T-33. And we got to solo the T-30. I must have put 6 or 8 hours in the T-33.
So in other words, you didn't go just climb into a Panther and go. You flew
No.
the T-bird first, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
we got some feel for the difference in the thrust and
What do you think? What was the difference in that? You know, if you were to compare,
mainly the lack of power in the groove. You know, you better be set up there because you got nothing left
And when you talk about being in the groove, you mean
at the approach end of your runway, either the landing on a carrier or in the coming into a landing field on an airstrip.
so when you've landed a carrier. Now I know carrier pilots. You know, I know enough carrier pilot guys. I know that they go to full power when they hit the deck. Did you do that in the?
Not at first. We started out flying the Panther in the straight decks, remember. The angle deck came later.
Right.
I was in the Antietam. I flew off the Antietam later on down at Gitmo. But basically at first we landed just like we did with the props. Made the same kind of approach. Flat paddles we called it. The LSO would
What does
wave
that
you in,
mean?
give you the cut, you'd drop the nose, pull the gear.
What's a flat paddle mean?
And no power off. But then later
So
on,
he would give a signal like that to cut the power. Okay.
his cut would be this.
Okay.
And,
And the signal for go around is
wave off.
wave off. Okay.
And I would, you'd get the cut, and you drop the nose, pull the tail down, is the way you thought of it. It's actually pull the nose up, I suppose. Put the power off, and then hope you got a wire before you got into the barricade. But when we got the angle deck, then we got this straight in approach that you're describing, where you left the power on, you didn't change anything, no attitude change, you flew right into the deck. And the airplane was built to withstand that kind of shock. And you would, as soon as you touched down, you went to full power. And the reason for that was you're on the angle, so you're going off the deck if you miss the wires.
Well, if you're on an angle, then you always landing in a crosswind then, are you?
Yeah, and the trick was to learn how to count for that. You see the ship's captain was a pilot too, and he knew what he was doing. So he'd try to get the wind where it would come down the deck, but it never happened. What you always did was you kind of crab, and visual approaches first. When you learn later on, it became with like a CCA, which was controlled approach in the black and night. But the approach was done by cocking your nose and picking up the angle. Now on the ships, if you see the platform of an angle deck ship, you'll see the place where the rear elevator used to be. There was an angle in there, a little V. You'd put your nose on there, which gave you a cock. You're about halfway between the landing area and the direction that the fore and aft point of the ship. So you were coming in sort of like that. And you actually touched down with your nose a little bit to the right of the center line. And
Now, you had to let's say, go through that again. I didn't quite follow it.
okay,
Use your hands, because I can see your hands on the.
okay. You're coming around at a very low altitude and you pick up the meatball.
So they had the meatball.
I'm describing a VFR approach now, not an IFR.
Okay, so this is in World War II. They had the meatball then too.
Yeah, no,
No.
we didn't have any in World War II. We had but on all angle deck carriers we had the meatball, which was a
I know what it is.
Fresnel lens,
Yeah.
and it's gyroscopically organized. You fly around to pick up the meatball, and you know you're on the right altitude, and you start your rate of descent to keep the meatball, keep the green, the light in the middle of the two arms, and keep it right there all the way in. That gives you your rate of descent. And you do that with your power.
Are you still looking at the LSO?
But you still have the LSO at the corner of your eye.
Okay.
But you're flying the meatball. And you fly it right into the deck. You kick it's on the left side. So they also had an emergency meatball on the right side if something happened to one.
Right. Yeah.
And you would fly it right into the wires, and the target wire was the number 3 wire, which was about 20% of the deck.
Okay.
And then when you catch the wire, you come to a screeching halt. You kick back, you take your feet off the brakes and let it kick back, raise your hook, hit the right rudder, and hit the right brake, I should say, get the left wheel going around toward the center of the deck, and pour on full power to pull out of there so you can make room for the next guy coming in behind you.
Yeah.
So you tried to get out of the gear as fast as you could.
So now in World War II, you had the same problem. There were landing
Yeah.
guys every 20 seconds or 30 seconds or something.
Yeah,
right?
you had to drop the barricade, and taxi over them, straight forward into the area.
Okay.
You'd be picked up by somebody on the deck who would motion you into position.
Right.
I watched those guys. I'd taxi up and they'd disappear almost. I'm almost over the bow, and they're out there giving me a signal, come a little bit forward, a little bit more. I've had enough. I'm not going any further. I'm not going over. So it was kind of a scary feeling.
So now you start off flying the T-33 and you get 6 or 8 hours in it.
Yeah.
Other than the lack of, I know that the throttle response in the T-33 was nothing like a prop, but a lot faster apparently.
Once you get going, and that was the point, you had to know then you had to pay more attention to how much runway you had ahead. As a prop, it's awful forgiving.
Yeah.
You could lift that thing off almost like a helicopter if you wanted to,
But
especially an F8.
But especially with how much torque effect was there on an F8? It must have been a tremendous amount of torque effect.
Of course, the Hellcat, the Bearcat rather, yes, there was a lot of time, and that was part of the problem. You know, if you took a wave off, you might spin yourself in with the torque roll. So, and that's part of the reason why you had to have partial power on the takeoff. Like I said, it would nose over enough to where the props would actually dig in.
Right.
Because
So you made carrier landings and takeoffs with the Bearcat then?
No, not. I did FCLP, but I never did a carrier landing with it.
FCLP, what's that?
Field carrier landing practice.
Okay,
We had a outlying field where we weren't the LSO. We painted a deck on the ground, for want of a better description, and they had a LSO out there to wave us around, give us and critique us on how we do.
So how much power would you add to go around?
Not full power, I'll tell you. You might torque roll. Not with the Bearcat. No.
I have a former acquaintance who did a torque roll on a P-51.
Oh, Killed him, didn't it?
Yeah, and his instructor pilot too.
Concern was overpower with the F8.
Yeah,
And I just loved that airplane. It was the best airplane I ever,
really.
best prop plane I ever flew.
Was
It would have been wonderful in combat. And I can't, for the life of me, I can't remember how many guns, but I remember flying air-to-air gunnery, you know, where we were trained in that, off Norfolk, off Oceana, Virginia Beach.
what'd you go against with air-to-air gunnery?
Pardon?
What did we do? Towed target?
Tow target, yeah. Another fellow. Oh, let's see. We used to have access to a cod squadron that would do the carrying. I've forgotten who, whether we did our own tows. Yeah, we did do our own tows because I'd done one.
Did you use a dart or one of those rags sort of
Well,
things?
bag. It's a banner,
Yeah.
and it's pretty good size. And I remember that I got something like 40 some hits in it one time. How can I remember that when I don't remember what kind of an airplane was towing it? But
How many? So out of 40 hit, how many shots was it to hit 40 times?
Probably 250.
Oh, really?
We didn't have a full load.
Yeah.
Now, you asked me how many guns, and I wish I could remember. You're going to have to look at it.
I'm guessing just 4. I mean, how many? 120 millimeters.
They're
I
in the
know,
same,
yeah. Okay,
same
so
vicinity, the wings, though.
Yeah, in 1955, you deployed on the Yorktown VF-94 flying a Cougar. So what was the difference between a Cougar and a Panther?
Yeah, 1955. I came back on active duty. I made regular Navy. I was recalled and made regular Navy. Reverted to lieutenant from lieutenant commander, and was happy as a clam. VF-94, which was stationed at Moffett Field, California.
Oh, tough place to stay, be stationed.
Yeah. And I had a new wife and all the rest of it.
Well, that's why I see that. We never talk about that sort of stuff. But. So, these airplanes are things I'm not that familiar with. I know what they look like, but the Panther was a straight-winged airplane, I believe.
Yes, it was. The Panther was a straight wing without the flying tail.
Okay.
The Cougar was a swept wing with the flying tail.
Same engine?
Pardon?
Same engine, do you think, or I don't, you know.
Yes.
So, okay, now the Cougar. So, now what's the difference between a Cougar and a Panther?
The Cougar and the Panther was a straight wing J48 engine. It would probably go about Mach 0.7 or 8. The point, I'm saying, not 8. 0.8. The Cougar, though, had the flying tail, and that meant that everything could move as a unit. As we described it, this becomes a problem when you're going through the sound barrier. But going through the sound barrier by straight and level with the Cougar was impossible. But it was swept wing, and we had to learn a new technique for landing.
What would be the different technique?
The only change was that you had less lift on takeoff and the landing. With the swept wing, it becomes less efficient. The straight wing is much more efficient at low air speeds. Okay. And at high air speeds, the swept wing was almost necessary to penetrate the sound barrier. So but it wasn't bought by the Navy to be supersonic, but you could get through the sound barrier, and we did that as a sort of a training exercise. We were going to get FJ3s, we thought, and we wound up with F9Fs eventually. The FJ3s folded. They were what they call it, the F86 conversion to the Navy version was the FJ3. The FJ3 I did not fly, but because it went out of commission, or the Navy did not use them to deploy the aircraft. Yeah,
Everybody I've talked to that flew the FJ3 or the F86 thought that was the best flying jet ever.
the F86 was a damn good airplane. I did not get to fly the FJ3 because it was at that precise time. This is dramatic too in a way. I was taxiing out with a guy that was going to be my wingman on my first flight in an FJ3. I'd gone through all the preliminary drone training and so forth, ready to go. And one of my squadron mates was making an approach into Moffett Field, and his engine seized on him, and he had to punch out. And so, at that moment, the guy that was leading me, who happened to be the ops officer, said, "We're going back in. We're not." So the most I got out of an FJ3 was a good taxi ride from the hangar to the runway to back to the hangar. That was it. And so I wound up with the maintenance job saying, "How are we going to fix this?" And we found out engine seizures were caused by something that we couldn't do in time to deploy. So they said, "Okay, you guys, you get F9, F8s. We got a bunch of them for you." So it was my job to ferry them. I don't know where they came from, but they came into Alameda. So I would go up to Alameda and pick up airplanes and fly them down.
And these were the what airplane? F8?
F8.
F8.
This is an F8. I'd never flown an F8, so.
Move your foot.
But I'd flown later on. I flew the E4, but we had F8s in the air.
So you deployed into Yorktown in 1955.
Yeah,
And what was your job on the Yorktown?
I was a maintenance officer in my squadron.
So you would have been about 33. You were born in 24, so 33.
Yeah, 33. Okay, that's right. And
You could do the same thing?
no, I never had any evidence of that. It didn't have enough power, I guess.
Yeah, maybe.
I suspect that's the answer, because it was pretty stable. I was surprised how stable it was. Even though I was ill prepared to fly a swept wing, I had flown a Panther, which was the same cockpit, so nothing's different in there, except for the flying wing, the flying tail. The flying tail had to be engaged at certain points, or it could be overrode.
Really?
Yes, and I can't remember how that worked, but I kept it engaged the entire time I flew it. But
So, now it says, now 1958, 57 you're in the staff, and then VT4 as a flight instructor flying a Buckeye. Why would they take a jet pilot and put him in a Buckeye?
that's a jet.
Oh, is it a training plane?
Yeah. Okay. I'm now on shore duty, and I just got transferred to the training command. I won't do that.
Okay.
I've been transferred to Pensacola into BTG 9, Basic Training Group 9, and we had TVs at that time. T-33, same thing, and
What do you call them? T3s?
TV.
TV?
Yeah. Lockheed.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. I'm just saying
Yeah.
the Navy, Air Force called it a T-33 or
Yeah,
T-bird.
that's why I used that term T-33
Yeah.
earlier.
What did the Navy call it?
TV.
Just TV.
Yeah, TV2
TV2. Okay.
was the version that I flew, and they used it. They were using it in BTG 9. I flew that for a short time, and then we got the Buckeyes, brand new. They were the J34 engine, single engine, and a jet. 4.5. It was a good trainer because it was underpowered, and I mean it. You could teach backside the power curve dramatically
Yeah.
to a new kid. It's basic training. The kid's already got he's already soloed in a teeny weeny T28.
Yeah. Right.
It wasn't the T28, T34.
T-34. Right.
And we were training these kids, and this is the first jets they'd flown in. So we were training them in transition, precision, acrobatics, gunnery, carrier landings, all of those things. And I was qualified at what they call TPA, transition, precision, acrobatics, formation, and gunnery.
So these are what the fighter pilots are going to go into that airplane.
They're going to go to Corpus, where they will continue on in a larger aircraft, but it'll be a jet
Right.
if they made it through. There was a large washout ratio at that point.
Really?
Yeah.
Was that partially because they didn't need the number of pilots?
Yeah, that had something to do with it.
Yeah, I was P4.
Oh, that was the Scooter was the best airplane I ever flew in my life.
What'd you call it?
Scooter?
Scooter.
Scooter, Scooter.
I never heard that before.
They use that term, the fighter pilots used to use that term all the time.
How come?
Yeah, I don't know, because it looks like a scooter. And we didn't care. We got more flying than they did with squadron, and I was given VF 192, VA 192, which had been a fighter squadron at one time. VA 192, the world famous Golden Dragons, and it was the happiest period of my life.
Really? Why?
Because I'd been selected for command, and I was really getting to fly airplanes that I wanted to fly. I was out of my fighter business. You know,
What do you mean out of the fighter business?
fighters became sort of extinct after the World War II in a way because they didn't have a mission.
Well, give an explanation. This is something people.
Okay.
The difference between a fighter and an attack airplane.
Okay, an attack aircraft was designed in the Navy. I'm talking about the Navy.
Sure.
It was designed originally. It isn't what they did with them, but it's what they were designed to do, is to deliver nuclear weapons. And so we were trained to deliver nuclear weapons. I won't go into the details because they may still be classified. But that was our job, and primarily. Learn to get on and off the carrier like you normally would. Do all the rest of the stuff. But our primary mission was to do nuclear delivery. The fighter pilots had nothing. There were no other aircraft in the air. What are they going to do?
So the fighters at that time would have been the F8 Crusader.
The Crusader, the F4 came along, F3,
F62, yeah, that'd be right. Yeah.
F2H, the Banshee, anyway, they had a number of fighter aircraft during that era.
Let's talk about the nuclear delivery a little bit. I mean, I flew F4s in Europe, and that was the two. We did the loft bombing and all that kind of stuff. And what was the Navy? How did the Navy deliver those nuclear weapons?
Basically, first of all, we had a training facility before we joined our squadron, which took us through a full syllabus, which included everything you need to do with the airplane. And the primary among them was nuclear delivery. So you learn how to fly the aircraft. Point is, we learned the basic profile of a attack mission. Starting at the attack, you had to make a delivery in which you were going to survive the delivery.
Hopefully.
So there are two methods of doing it. There was loft maneuver, or you could fly over and drop it from some altitude. Well, the Navy couldn't do the latter, so we did only the loft maneuvers. The loft maneuvers had ways of pitching off the weapon at an angle so that it flowed through the air in a trajectory that was predictable based upon the wind situation and all the rest of the factors that were involved at the delivery point. And so you had to it would pitch off at a particular angle. The pilot himself sat down in the ready room and talked with the air intelligence officer usually, or somebody that knew the target area, and you would go over the factors that were involved there. Field altitude, the altitude that you're going to be at, and so on. And you put that into the calculations that were measured in your delivery system. I don't know how the system worked, but it was projected to flow in a way that was programmable by the pilot. Now this is rudimentary, so I knew I wanted to pitch off, say, at angle at say 20 degrees in order for the bomb to travel that far to the target, and so I would crank in that much information, and then the people that managed the delivery system will go down and tweak it to that particular point. I would have that pre-programmed in my program, my plan. And I would sit down and plan the whole flight that I was going to make based upon that particular moment in which I had to make that delivery.
So
Where am I? At sea, or am I at a land base? We're always at sea, so we had to program within it a period of oversea flying, and then over the land, and then navigate to the target. And you had to be at low level when you got to the target.
all visual,
All visual.
no radar.
No, at that point.
And then use a ground
A6,
reference.
A6.
Use a ground reference to pull, like a road or something like that.
We had a little map that we developed of our own. We did it ourselves. We didn't have anybody do it for us. I sat down and planned my flights. This is old stuff, but it was very useful.
And we did the same kind of thing. So.
Well, I would cut up a map and make it fit into my knee pad where I could look down and roll it to the point where I was at the time.
Right.
I had particular IPs along the way in my track to go into the target area.
What was the airspeed you were using to navigate to the IP?
300, it's usually, they said 320, but I used 360 because it was an even number.
And then
6.6 to 36.
And then what did you push
6
up?
miles a minute.
From IP to target, what did you push up to?
500 knots.
Oh,
Every delivery was made at 500 knots. You could get that I did. You could do probably a little bit more in some places. That's indicated,
Yeah, right. Yeah.
not true airspeed. That's
So
indicated
we
airspeed.
pushed up to 540 in the F4.
You 500 knots, and then
540, it was unbelievable
you
how
hit
fast it got there.
the IP, the point at which you would push the button, which would initiate this trajectory that I'm looking for.
Sure.
Then pull up at the secondary IP, and then continue that maneuver until I finished.
Oh, you went
Now,
over
if
the top?
it didn't pitch off,
You went over the
I had
top
a
there.
backup maneuver where I would continue on and make the delivery from vertical,
Yeah.
which meant it would be over
Right.
the shoulder.
I talked to an F-105 pilot, and they ran in at 600. They did their low.
Yeah,
500
we couldn't
pushes.
quite make that
Yeah.
with the 8.4.
Yeah.
500 was comfortable enough, but you're 50 feet over the ground,
Yeah.
so you got to be pretty careful. You plan your running point to be somewhere in the vicinity of an area that's flat.
That, and then tell me, Richard, and what were you doing there? Oh, that was
I was skipper of the
you
squadron.
were the skipper. Oh, okay, cool.
I was CO of VA 192.
Did you fly missions?
Oh, well, we started the Vietnam War. That was 1964. See, the war really began then because we started surveillance missions at that time. Now, I didn't fly any combat missions other than just surveillance. And we were doing that pretty much in secret.
So the Gulf of Tonkin was.
That's where we were operating from, yeah.
So were you on the same ship with Ev Southwick?
Who?
Ev Southwick.
No.
Ev was he was flying that day. He was up with Stockdale when that happened.
Oh, at Stockdale at that time. See, that was later. See, I'm talking about the whole year of 1964. We were deployed until November, I think it was. We came back. We were extended and extended and extended because the war was being started. We were flying mainly surveillance missions and planning for alternative
So you
methods.
had that. So you come back, and then you go back to on the then you go back on the Midway as a strike ops officer.
Yeah, I finished my tour. I was relieved by Mike Zeck, Gene Tissot. He took over the squadron, and they got different aircraft after that.
So were you flying airplanes then?
Not when I was strike ops officer, except to keep up my.
What kind of airplanes were in your command? Under your command then?
Well, I had no command at that time. I was strike operations officer.
What does that mean?
That was a fairly new concept, and it was designed to provide the air wing commander with a voice and ability of a pilot to manage the flow of weapons and so forth in the Vietnam environment, to make sure that they got the right weapon to the right target. Because we were faced with the terrible problem of never overreaching because of the direction we were getting from Washington.
Explain that.
Okay, we were given specific targets, and we had to make sure we hit that specific target and the right kind of ammunition, or somebody get relieved. So my job was to make sure that we got the weapons from the bilges to the aircraft at the right aircraft at the right time in the right place for launch at a particular time. So everything was precision. It became so precise that we couldn't hardly manage a war. I'd never been in a war like that where everything was so regulated. And we had to make sure that the right bomb...
What would be a typical target?
Pardon?
What would be a typical target?
Well, see, and that it would be something that... the typical target in Vietnam would be probably a bridge or a power plant. Probably a bridge or power plant. I never saw anything that had any population.
What was that? What was that famous bridge? The
Thanhua Bridge.
Thanhua Bridge, yeah.
Yeah, we went after that a number of times. The
Over and
problem
over
is
and
it was
over.
north of the DMZ would change. You're familiar with that term?
Yeah, sure.
It would change from week to week, day to day, hour to hour. You couldn't go above that particular line.
Yeah, F. Southwick, who just passed recently, he spent 6.5 years as a POW, and he got shot down on attacking that damn bridge.
Thanhua Bridge.
Yeah, and what actually, he was flying an F4 and fired some Zuni rockets at a gun emplacement.
See, that's
But
such
anyway-
a waste of manpower.
Well,
such a
and
waste.
apparently the fins came off. He thought the fins got caught and went into the intake, and all of a sudden the engine just, started, everything was going crazy on the instruments, and you're losing power. And he and his backseater, they thought they had enough power that they could make it to this river. And he thought, if I can get this thing to this damn river, which is a pretty wide river, maybe I can not get captured. But anyway, it was just, the airplane made it, but they punched out. And
Otherwise, they'd have been dead. Yeah.
and then the airplane ended up sitting in the river, and the Navy, of course, tried to bomb it, but they, you could see shell holes all over the place. There's a book about it. It's called Phantom in the River, and but the Vietnamese then floated the son of a gun and brought it up the river.
Oh, is that right?
Oh yeah, they took it, and then it's in Hanoi right now.
Oh,
And Ed went back there about 10 years ago and saw the airplane. It's on display, and he could see what actually went wrong when he got under. He could see what actually happened. He broke his shoulder. He got captured. The other guy got captured. They both got out. And he was a POW for 6.5
I bet
years.
Bill Stark knows him. He was in the Hanoi Hill.
Yeah, he was. Eb just died about 2 months ago, I think. Nice guy, and he said the problem was, as far as he was concerned, was when they would schedule these attacks, the Vietnamese kind of figured it out.
Oh God, it was so obvious.
Yeah.
I mean, they were guarding. I was receiving top secret messages
Yeah.
of information that everybody knew anyway. That's my point, I guess. It was such a strain on those.
Well, he said that they would figure that from the time about every hour and a half they would strike the same target. So the guys just there smoke a cigarette. Well, here they come again. Get ready for the next.
And the other thing that we always did, we always had the leader first, and he was the guy they went for. We always did that in combat, didn't we?
Yeah.
We still do it. And so it's no big calculation for the gook down on the ground to pick out the right guy.
Yeah.
So the guy in the lead is going to get it first. So we had to break up our teams a little bit. See, I worked as strike ops officer as a kind of a buffer. I'd already had a squadron. The air wing commander has had a squadron. He's now the wing commander. And by the guy by the name of Bob Moore. And Bob and I used to sit and talk head to head on, no, you don't want to do this, you want to do that. Argue out various points. He was a fighter pilot, so he didn't know much about attack. So he'd try to bleed me dry of what I knew about the attack situation. So we would,
Did they have nukes on board the ships by any chance?
I really don't know.
Hmm.
I'm not gonna, I'm being hedging a little bit because I don't know.
Didn't they lose an A4 with a nuke on board over there somewhere off Okinawa somewhere?
Well, it would have been probably off of Hawaii, if
I
anything.
think it was, no, it was off Okinawa. Well, no, I don't think it was during this time period.
It was not.
But it went down to 16,000 feet. It's apparently still down.
We matched up, we did training in that,
Right,
but it was done in Hawaii,
right.
in which we would actually latch on our own nuclear weapon that we were going to deliver to a target. And we delivered it.
Well, you dropped shape, so you didn't drop real bombs. Did you?
Yes, but
We
we
had
had
shape.
the real thing, I'm telling you. It wasn't activated, of course. It had not been.
Did you have the?
There was no way you could fire it, but the weight and lift and all the rest of it is different.
Really?
They could not replicate the.
Yeah, we used a thing that looked like the weapon, but it was
Yes.
a shape, and then we would drop those.
That's
things.
why they called it shape.
And I pulled up one time and we
But it
released it.
didn't weigh near.
So you retired in 1975.
Right. CO fax fac.
But you kept busy after that, didn't you? Wow.
Yeah, I went in and spent some time with Jim Holloway at the Pentagon.
Who was that?
He became CNO.
Oh.